Stepmom kicked me out of Dad's will. Now she's suing me for the property she never knew I owned. The look on Patricia's face was worth every second of the 10 years I spent plotting this moment. Her perfectly painted red lips trembled as she stared at the foreclosure notice on her precious McMansion, the one she'd bought with my inheritance money. But here's the real kicker. While she's being evicted from her dream home, I'm sitting pretty in a $4.2 million Victorian mansion that she never knew existed. The best part? She's about to waste her last dollars trying to sue me for it. Karma, as they say, is a patient mistress. Every subscriber counts. Help us reach the next level by clicking that subscribe button. Let me take you back to where this all began. I was 14 when my mom died from an aggressive form of cancer that took her from diagnosis to death in just 8 months. Dad was destroyed, we both were. But Patricia? She saw an opportunity. She was Dad's new legal secretary, all legs and sympathy, armed with tight skirts and tissues for his tears. Within a year of Mom's death, she had secured a perfect platinum ring on her finger and a place in our home. I still remember the first red flag. It was during the wedding reception, when she thought no one was watching. I caught her in Dad's study, rifling through his financial documents. When I confronted her, she laughed it off, claiming she was just trying to understand the family finances to be a better wife. I was 14, not stupid. But who would believe a teenager's suspicions over the tears of a concerned new stepmother? That's when I learned my first lesson in revenge. Patience is everything. Patricia was smart, I'll give her that. She never went for the obvious play. There were no wicked stepmother cliches of making me clean floors or missing meals. No, her game was far more subtle. She was death by 1,000 cuts, each one so small that explaining it made me sound paranoid. It started with forgetting to tell me about family dinner plans, leaving me to eat alone while they dined at fancy restaurants. Then came the scheduling conflicts. My father-daughter weekend plans mysteriously colliding with her pre-planned events that couldn't be rescheduled. Every time I tried to talk to Dad about it, she was there, spinning my words into teenage drama. "Oh, James," she would say, her voice dripping with concern, "Sarah's just having trouble adjusting. It's normal for teenagers to act out after trauma." She made my valid concerns sound like the tantrums of a troubled child. But here's where Patricia made her fatal mistake. She underestimated my mother's family, particularly my grandfather. While she was busy playing the perfect wife, I was spending weekends with my maternal grandparents, learning about family trusts, property law, and the importance of playing the long game from my grandfather, a retired judge who'd seen more gold diggers than a California prospector. On my 16th birthday, while Patricia was convincing my father to invest in her brother's foolproof business venture, which, surprise, went bankrupt 2 years later, my grandfather gave me the gift that would eventually become Patricia's undoing. The Victorian mansion on Maple Grove, placed in an ironclad trust that even my father couldn't touch. "Keep this quiet," Grandfather advised, his eyes twinkling with the wisdom of someone who'd spent 40 years watching people try to outsmart the law. Sometimes the best card is the one you never show, and quiet I kept it. Through the next 8 years, I watched Patricia's manipulation masterpiece unfold. She isolated Dad from his old friends, claiming they were stuck in his grief, and he needed to move forward. She convinced him to move our family photos to the attic because they were holding us in the past. Each move was calculated, designed to erase Mom's memory and strengthen her hold on Dad's heart and his wallet. By the time I graduated college, Patricia had succeeded in her ultimate goal, convincing my father to rewrite his will. I discovered this during his final days as cancer. The same cruel thief that took my mother came to claim him too. Patricia made sure to tell me, with that fake sympathy smile plastered on her face, that I had been completely cut out. "It's for the best, dear," she said, patting my hand with her French manicured talons. "Your father was so disappointed in how you turned out. All that resistance to our new family dynamic. It broke his heart." What she didn't know was that every single family dynamic conversation had been recorded over the years. Every manipulation, every subtle dig, every orchestrated conflict. All documented and dated, building a pattern that any half-decent lawyer would salivate over. So here we are, 10 years after she first stepped into our lives. Patricia's sitting in her lawyer's office, preparing to sue me for the Victorian mansion she just discovered I own. She's convinced it must have been part of Dad's estate, hidden away somewhere she hadn't looked. The irony is delicious. She's about to spend the last of her money, my inheritance, on a lawsuit that's not only doomed to fail but will expose every single one of her manipulations. The best revenge isn't served cold. It's served with impeccable timing and irrefutable evidence. And as I sit here in my grandfather's study, watching the sunset paint the Victorian stained glass windows in shades of amber and crimson, I can't help but smile. Patricia's about to learn that karma doesn't just knock. Sometimes it brings a whole legal team and a foreclosure notice. The game is far from over, but the first move, that's been 10 years in the making, and it's absolutely perfect. As predicted, Patricia's lawsuit landed on my desk exactly 3 days after she discovered my ownership of the Victorian mansion. Her lawyer, a sleazy ambulance chaser named Marcus Powell, had the audacity to demand an immediate response to their time-sensitive legal inquiry regarding misappropriated estate assets. I couldn't have scripted it better myself. What Patricia doesn't realize is that every move she's making now was choreographed years ago, back when she thought she was the only one playing chess. While she was busy orchestrating my exile from my father's life, I was documenting every single manipulation, every calculated gesture, every coincidental scheduling conflict that kept me from spending time with Dad. The beauty of Patricia's manipulation was always in its subtlety. Take, for instance, the Christmas of 2016. I was 19 and home from college for the holidays. Dad had promised to continue our tradition of watching It's a Wonderful Life on Christmas Eve, just like we'd done with Mom. Patricia waited until December 23rd to announce she'd already committed them to her sister's destination Christmas party in Aspen. "Oh, Sarah, honey," she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I thought your father told you about the change of plans. You know how important family traditions are to me." The irony of her destroying our family tradition while preaching about their importance wasn't lost on me. But I played my part perfectly. I acted disappointed but understanding, just as I had dozens of times before. What Patricia never noticed was the small recording device in my jacket pocket, capturing every word of her performance. It wasn't just that conversation. I had hundreds of hours of similar interactions, all meticulously dated and cataloged. Dad's gradual transformation under Patricia's influence was like watching a masterclass in psychological manipulation. She never criticized me directly to him. Instead, she mastered the art of the concerned observation. "James, I'm worried about Sarah. Did you notice how she barely spoke to your colleagues at the firm dinner?" Of course, she had conveniently forgotten to tell me about the dress code, leaving me embarrassingly underdressed and self-conscious. Or my personal favorite, "Darling, I hate to mention this, but I saw Sarah's car outside that questionable bar on 4th Street. She neglected to mention that the questionable bar was actually the coffee shop where I tutored underprivileged kids, a fact she well knew, as she'd seen me there numerous times. Each manipulation was subtle enough that calling her out made me look paranoid or oversensitive. To Dad, they painted a picture of a troubled daughter acting out, while Patricia emerged as the patient, understanding stepmother trying to hold the family together. But Patricia's greatest talent was her ability to isolate Dad from anyone who might see through her act. One by one, his old friends stopped coming around. His sister, my Aunt Beth, was gradually pushed to the periphery of our lives after she questioned Patricia's motives one too many times. "It's just that they're stuck in the past, James," Patricia would say, massaging Dad's shoulders as she planted her poisonous thoughts. "They can't accept that you found happiness again. It's not healthy for you or for Sarah to keep dwelling in grief." The real masterstroke came when she convinced Dad to sell our old house, the one full of memories with Mom, and move into a gaudy McMansion in the newly developed part of town. A fresh start, she called it. What it really meant was erasing every trace of my mother from our daily lives. But while Patricia was busy rewriting our family history, I was building an airtight case against her. Every lost invitation to family events, every misplaced message from Dad, every unfortunate scheduling conflict was documented. My grandfather's lessons in patience and preparation were about to pay off. The day Patricia's lawyer served me with the lawsuit, I was ready. My own legal team, handpicked by my grandfather before his passing, had been reviewing the evidence for months. Every recorded conversation, every manipulative email, every suspicious financial transaction had been analyzed and organized into a devastating counternarrative. Now, as I watch Patricia strut into her lawyer's office through the cafe window across the street, I can't help but admire her confidence. She still thinks she's the puppet master, completely unaware that her strings were cut long ago. Her designer handbag, bought with my inheritance money, swings carelessly as she disappears into the building. The meeting today is just a preliminary discussion about her lawsuit, but it's also the beginning of her downfall. My lawyer will be presenting our initial response, which includes just a taste of the evidence we've accumulated. It's enough to make them nervous, but not enough to show our full hand. Patricia's about to learn the first rule of karma. What goes around comes around with compound interest. As I sip my coffee and check my watch, I know exactly what's happening 11 floors up in that law office. Patricia's carefully constructed world is about to develop its first crack. By the time we're done, those cracks will become canyons, and her perfectly crafted facade will crumble into dust. The real dance is just beginning, and I've had 10 years to perfect my steps. The preliminary meeting went exactly as planned. My lawyer, Catherine Chun, a shark in a Chanel suit, just sent me the surveillance photos of Patricia leaving her attorney's office. Gone was the confident strut from this morning. Instead, she practically staggered to her Mercedes, her perfectly coiffed hair now disheveled from running her fingers through it countless times during the meeting. The first crack in her armor has appeared, right on schedule. What Patricia doesn't understand yet is that while she was busy playing checkers with my father's estate, I was playing three-dimensional chess. Every move I've made since I was 16 has been building to this moment. The Victorian mansion she's so desperately trying to claim is just the tip of the iceberg. My grandfather, in his infinite wisdom, didn't just give me a property. He gave me an education in patience and strategy. During those weekly dinners at his house, while Patricia thought I was just a sulking teenager avoiding family time, I was learning about property law, trust funds, and the intricate dance of high-stakes litigation. The key to winning any battle, my grandfather would say, sipping his evening scotch, is making your opponent think they're winning until the very moment they lose. Those words became my mantra as I built my case against Patricia. While she was redecorating our family home for the third time in 5 years, I was graduating summa cum laude from law school. While she was convincing my father to invest in her sister's failed organic smoothie franchise, I was securing internships at top firms, building a network that would prove invaluable. Every time she excluded me from a family event, I was actually attending seminars on estate law and financial forensics. The Victorian mansion itself is a masterpiece of legal engineering. My grandfather set up the trust with 3 layers of protection, each triggered by specific attempts to contest ownership. Patricia's lawsuit just activated the first layer, a detailed documentation of the property's history that proves it was never part of my father's estate. But that's not the brilliant part. The brilliant part is that each attempt to challenge the trust triggers an automatic review of the challenger's financial dealings with the estate. In other words, Patricia's lawsuit has just given us legal grounds to examine every financial decision she influenced in my father's last years. And oh, what a treasure trove that will be. I pull out my tablet and review the preliminary findings our forensic accountant uncovered. There's the investment in her brother's tech startup that mysteriously folded after receiving $250,000 from my father's retirement fund. The series of jewelry purchases that coincidentally matched the exact amounts of my college fund installments. The second mortgage on our family home that funded her sister's revolutionary wellness center, now a defunct strip mall in the bad part of town. But my favorite discovery is still to come. Hidden in the maze of shell companies and transferred assets is a pattern that even Patricia doesn't know we've uncovered. Every major financial decision she influenced had a hidden beneficiary. A holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. A holding company that, according to our investigations, is owned by none other than Patricia's first husband. The one she claimed was ancient history, I take another sip of my coffee and open the secure email from Catherine. The surveillance photos show Patricia making a frantic phone call in her car, probably to that same ex-husband. She doesn't realize it yet, but that call will be her second mistake of the day. My phone buzzes. A text from Marcus Powell, Patricia's lawyer. We need to discuss settlement options. I allow myself a small smile. They've seen enough to know they're in trouble, but not enough to realize how deep that trouble goes. I think about my father's last days, how Patricia managed to keep me away from the hospital until it was almost too late. When I finally got to see him, he was barely conscious, but his last words to me weren't the disappointed declarations Patricia had claimed were in his letter. Instead, he squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're so much like your mother." Stronger than anyone knows, he was right. I am like my mother, but I'm also my grandfather's student. While Patricia was playing at being the grieving widow, I was executing a plan years in the making. The Victorian mansion isn't just a property. It's a trap, and Patricia walked right into it. I send a one-word response to Marcus. Monday, the weekend will give Patricia time to panic, to make more mistakes, to reach out to people she shouldn't contact. Every move she makes now only strengthens our case. By Monday, the second layer of the trust protection will activate, triggering an automatic audit of all estate transactions from the past 10 years. From my office window in the Victorian mansion, I can see the garden my mother used to love. The roses she planted are still blooming, tended now by the same gardener who cared for them when I was a child. Patricia tried to have him fired from maintaining Dad's new property, claiming his services were too expensive. She never knew he's been working for me all these years, maintaining not just the garden, but also keeping detailed records of every conversation she had during her surprise visits to inspect the property she thought would one day be hers. The long game isn't just about patience. It's about having pieces in play that your opponent never even knew existed. And my pieces are finally ready to move. Monday arrives with the weight of destiny. I'm sitting in the conference room of Chun and Associates, watching Patricia's carefully constructed world implode through the lens of a PowerPoint presentation. Our forensic accountant, Mr. Rodriguez, is methodically walking through 10 years of financial manipulation, and with each slide, Patricia's face loses another shade of color. As you can see, Rodriguez explains, pointing to a complex flowchart, every major withdrawal from Mr. Henderson's accounts between 2015 and 2023 can be traced to one of these 7 shell companies. He clicks to the next slide, and there it is, the smoking gun we've been waiting to reveal. Patricia's ex-husband's signature, clear as day, on incorporation documents for all 7 companies. That's impossible, Patricia whispers, but her trembling hands betray her. She knows we've caught her. The perfectly crafted narrative of the devoted widow is unraveling thread by thread. Marcus Powell, her lawyer, looks like he's aged 10 years in the last hour. "We need a brief recess," he manages to croak out. But Catherine Chen, my shark in Chanel, isn't done yet. "Before we break," she says, sliding a thick folder across the table, "you should review this. It's your client's letter to Sarah. Supposedly from her father's last days." Catherine's smile is razor sharp. "We had it analyzed by a forensic linguist. Would you like to hear their conclusions about its authenticity?" Patricia's face, already pale, turns almost translucent. The letter, her masterpiece of manipulation, was supposed to be her insurance policy. It was filled with carefully crafted disappointments and regrets, allegedly from my father, explaining why I deserved to be cut out of his will. She had used it like a weapon, reading choice excerpts to family friends, ensuring my isolation was complete. But Patricia made one crucial mistake. She didn't know about Dad's private journal. I reach into my briefcase and pull out a worn leather notebook. "This," I say, opening it to a marked page, "is my father's actual writing from his last months. Notice the difference in tone, word choice, and most importantly, his true feelings about his daughter." The journal entry I begin to read aloud is from 3 weeks before his death. "Sarah reminds me more of Claire every day. She has her mother's strength, her patience." Patricia worries that Sarah's distance shows resentment, but I see what Claire would see. A young woman playing her cards close, just like her mother taught her. I regret letting Patricia's concerns influence me so much these past years. But Sarah, she's smarter than I was. She's waiting, watching, learning, just like Claire would have done. Patricia's perfectly manicured nails dig into the conference room table. That journal is a fake, she spits out, but there's panic in her voice now. The journal has been authenticated. Catherine responds smoothly, as have the recordings, and there it is, the final nail in Patricia's coffin. Her head snaps up at the word, recordings, and for the first time, real fear crosses her face. I pull out my phone and play one of my favorite clips. Patricia, thinking she's alone in Dad's study, on the phone with her ex-husband. James doesn't suspect a thing. Her voice crackles through the speaker. Once the old fool changes his will, we can start moving the bigger assets. The daughter? Please. I've got her painted as such a problem child. He barely questions it anymore when she's not around. The recording continues, detailing plans and schemes. Each word another shovel of dirt on the grave of Patricia's credibility. By the time it ends, Marcus Powell is openly loosening his tie, likely calculating how fast he can distance himself from this case. There are hundreds of hours of similar recordings, I say quietly. Every manipulation, every lie, every secret phone call. But here's what's really interesting, Patricia. Would you like to know where the Victorian Mansion's profits have been going all these years? I nod to Catherine, who clicks to the final slide. On the screen appears the incorporation documents for the Sarah Mitchell Memorial Center for Grief Counseling, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping children who have lost parents navigate the complexities of blended families and potential exploitation. The center's first case study, I continue, my voice steady, will be a detailed examination of how predatory individuals target grieving families. Your methods will be used to teach counselors and legal professionals the warning signs of systematic manipulation. Patricia stands so abruptly her chair topples backward. This is slander. I'll sue you for everything you have. Catherine's laugh is gentle but deadly. Ms. Henderson, I don't think you understand. You're not in a position to sue anyone anymore. In fact, she slides another document across the table. This is a notice of criminal investigation. The FBI is very interested in those offshore accounts you and your ex-husband have been managing. As Patricia sinks back into her righted chair, I think about my mother's favorite saying, the truth has a way of rising, like cream in coffee. For 10 years, I've watched Patricia stir the pot, keeping everything mixed up and muddied. But now, finally, the truth is rising to the top. The recess is called, and as Patricia is led out by her visibly shaken lawyer, I remain seated, my mother's journal clutched in my hands. The revelation isn't just about exposing Patricia's crimes. It's about reclaiming my father's memory, clearing the fog of manipulation that clouded his final years. The game Patricia thought she was winning has just revealed itself to be something entirely different. And we're not even done yet. 3 weeks after our revelation meeting, I'm standing in front of the Victorian Mansion, watching a team of contractors install the new signage. The Sarah Mitchell Memorial Center for Grief Counseling. The morning sun catches the gold lettering, making it shimmer like a beacon of hope, which, ironically, is exactly what Patricia's actions helped create. The headlines have been relentless. Widow's scheme exposed. Multimillion-dollar estate fraud uncovered. FBI investigates sophisticated inheritance scam. Grieving children's center born from family betrayal. Patricia's fall from grace hasn't just been spectacular. It's been comprehensive. My phone buzzes with a text from Catherine. FBI just arrested the ex-husband in Grand Cayman. He's singing like a bird. I allow myself a small smile. Of course he is. Men like him always save themselves first. Patricia herself was arrested yesterday, trying to board a flight to Switzerland with a newly issued passport. The look on her face when the federal agents approached her at the gate was, according to the security footage Catherine obtained, absolutely priceless. All those years of careful manipulation, of calculated moves, undone by plain old panic. But the sweetest victory came this morning, with the court's final ruling on my father's estate. Not only was his last will invalidated due to proven undue influence, but Patricia's own careful documentation of her concerns about my behavior provided the strongest evidence against her. Every email, every noted incident, every carefully worded complaint about my absence at family functions. They all helped establish the pattern of isolation and manipulation she had orchestrated. I walk up the mansion steps, running my hand along the familiar banister. The contractors have done an amazing job renovating the space while preserving its historic character. The front parlor, once a formal sitting room, is now a warm, welcoming reception area. The study where my grandfather taught me patience has been transformed into a cozy counseling room for teenagers. Ms. Mitchell, a voice calls from behind me. I turn to see Dr. Rachel Martinez, the center's newly hired head counselor. We just received our first referral. A 12-year-old girl whose father recently remarried. She's showing signs of isolation and depression. My heart tightens. I know those signs all too well. Her stepmother, Dr. Martinez continues, consulting her tablet, has been gradually limiting her contact with her maternal grandparents, claiming they're interfering with the new family dynamic. I close my eyes briefly, remembering Patricia's exact same words from years ago. Make sure the grandparents are involved in the counseling process. I tell Dr. Martinez, they're often the strongest allies these children have. As if on cue, my phone lights up with another update from Catherine. Patricia's plea deal has been finalized. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she's agreed to participate in a comprehensive study of her manipulation techniques. Every tactic, every strategy, every subtle move she used will be documented and analyzed, creating a blueprint for identifying and preventing similar cases of family exploitation. The irony isn't lost on me. Patricia's legacy will be helping protect the very people she once targeted. Every child who walks through these doors will benefit from the detailed understanding of her methods. Every family court judge who reads our case study will be better equipped to spot the warning signs. Every counselor who trains here will learn to recognize the subtle patterns of isolation and manipulation. I make my way to what used to be the mansion's library, now converted into a family meeting room. The walls are lined with photographs, not just of my own family, but of all types of family structures. Blended families who made it work, single parents, grandparents raising grandchildren, adoptive families. It's a testament to what family should be. A source of support, not manipulation. My mother's portrait holds a place of honor above the fireplace. Next to it hangs a plaque with her favorite quote, "The truth rises like cream in coffee." Below these, in smaller letters, is the center's motto, "Healing hearts, protecting futures." A final text from Catherine arrives. Patricia's McMansion goes up for auction next week. Her lawyer says she's requesting one last visit to collect personal items. Should we allow it? I think about it for a moment, remembering all the times Patricia denied me access to my childhood home, all the memories she tried to erase. But then I look around at what her actions have helped create. A safe haven for children facing similar struggles, a place of healing and protection. Yes, I text back. Let her say goodbye to what she lost. And Catherine? Make sure she sees the center's brochure on her way out. She should know what her legacy will really be. As I stand in the warm sunlight streaming through the mansion's stained glass windows, I realize that revenge, properly executed, isn't just about making someone pay for their crimes. Sometimes, it's about transforming their darkness into light, their cruelty into compassion, their greed into giving. The sweet taste of justice isn't in Patricia's downfall. It's in the lives that will be better because we exposed her methods. Every child who finds help here, every family that heals within these walls, every predatory step-parent who gets caught before they can cause damage, that's the real victory. Mother would be proud. Not of the revenge, perhaps, but of what it became. 1 year later, I stand in my grandfather's study, now my private office at the center, holding the last piece of Patricia's unraveling legacy, her prison memoir. Her publisher sent it for our review, not out of courtesy, but as part of her plea agreement. Any proceeds from the book will go directly to the Center's Scholarship Fund for children affected by estate fraud. The irony of Patricia's final attempt at manipulation becoming another resource for her victims isn't lost on me. I flip through the pages, noting the spots where she tries to paint herself as misunderstood, a victim of circumstances. But between her lines of self-justification are inadvertent confessions, detailed descriptions of how she identified vulnerable families, how she systematically isolated her targets, how she turned family members against each other. It's a masterclass in manipulation, but not in the way she intended. Dr. Martinez knocks on my door, bringing me back to the present. "The new support group is starting," she says softly. "I thought you might want to sit in." I follow her to what used to be our formal dining room, now transformed into a comfortable group therapy space. 10 teenagers sit in a circle, each carrying stories that echo my own past. Their faces reflect different stages of the journey I know too well. Anger, confusion, grief, and most importantly, hope. A girl who reminds me of my younger self speaks first. "My stepmom says I'm being difficult when I want to visit my mom's parents," she says, tears threatening to spill. She says I'm not trying hard enough to be part of the new family. I feel my throat tighten. A year ago, these words would have triggered memories of pain and loss. Now, they're a reminder of why this center exists. Your grandparents are your connection to your mother, I tell her, sharing the wisdom my grandfather once gave me. Anyone who tries to sever that connection isn't protecting a new family. They're destroying an existing one. After the session, I return to my office and open my mother's journal, the real one, not the fabricated version Patricia tried to use against me. The pages fall open to my favorite entry, written just months before her diagnosis. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, remember that strength isn't just about standing your ground. It's about building something better on it. Whatever life throws at you, find a way to turn it into a foundation for good." That's exactly what we've done. The center has helped over 200 families in its first year. We've trained dozens of family court judges to recognize signs of manipulation. Our research department, funded partly by Patricia's seized assets, has developed protocols now used nationwide for evaluating potential financial exploitation in blended families. My phone buzzes, a news alert. Patricia's ex-husband has agreed to testify against a network of estate fraud perpetrators he worked with. The dominoes keep falling, each revelation protecting more families from predators like them. I walk to the window, watching as parents and children arrive for afternoon sessions. The Victorian mansion, once a symbol of my quiet resistance, has become a beacon of healing. The gardens my mother loved now provide a peaceful space for families to rebuild trust. The kitchen where my grandfather taught me patience hosts cooking therapy sessions for grieving children. A framed newspaper article on my wall catches my attention, from personal vendetta to public service. How one woman's quest for justice changed family counseling. The reporter got it partly right, but they missed the deeper truth. This wasn't just about justice, it was about transformation. Patricia's last letter arrived yesterday, part of her mandatory rehabilitation program. She wrote about regret, about understanding the damage she caused. Whether her remorse is genuine doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that her story, her techniques, her entire playbook is now being used to help others avoid the same fate. The center's annual report sits on my desk, filled with success stories. Children reconnecting with estranged grandparents. Families learning to navigate complex emotional territories. Courts intervening before manipulation can take root. Each success is a brick in the foundation my mother wrote about. As the sun sets, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows, I think about how revenge transformed into redemption. The money that Patricia accumulated through years of manipulation now funds scholarships. The techniques she perfected are taught as warning signs. Her pursuit of wealth created a legacy of healing she never intended. My grandfather's chess set still sits in the corner of my office, a reminder that patience and strategy aren't just tools for revenge. They're instruments of change. The long game wasn't just about exposing Patricia. It was about creating something lasting from the ashes of her deception. Tomorrow, we're launching a new program. Free legal clinics for families suspecting financial exploitation. The funding? It comes from the auction of Patricia's McMansion, sold for twice what she paid for it. Even her greed, in the end, served a greater purpose. I close my mother's journal and look at her picture on my desk. "We did it, Mom," I whisper. "We didn't just expose the darkness. We built something light." Outside, the garden lights flicker on, illuminating the path for evening group sessions. More families arriving, more hearts healing, more futures being protected. This is the true taste of justice. Not the fall of the wicked, but the rise of something good from their wreckage. The price of greed, it turns out, can be transformed into a currency of hope.
My in-laws claimed my unborn baby had no rights to my husband's wealth, so they blocked me from his bank accounts. Until my DNA test exposed their lies and got them sued for fraud. It was the phone call that changed everything. I still remember the way my heart sank when I saw the name on the screen. It was the lawyer, the one who had been handling my husband's affairs for the past few years. I hadn't heard from him since James's funeral, and I couldn't help but feel a little sick to my stomach as I swiped to answer. I had expected the usual follow-up messages, the ones telling me everything was fine, that the legal paperwork was on track and that the estate was in order. But that was not what I got. Ms. Hawthorne. His voice was cold, professional, and it made my pulse race. There's an issue with the inheritance. I froze. My throat tightened and for a moment I couldn't say anything. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears. I had just lost James, the love of my life, and now I was hearing that something was wrong with his estate. My mind spun in 1,000 directions, but I couldn't find the words to ask what was going on. What do you mean? I finally managed to choke out. The family is contesting the inheritance, he said flatly. They're claiming your unborn child has no legal rights to the estate. I just want to take a quick second to express my gratitude to each one of you for joining me on this journey. Your support means the world, and if you're finding these stories of strength and perseverance inspiring, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's free and helps us grow this wonderful community. Now let's get into it. I felt the floor drop out from under me. What? My mind reeled as his words echoed in my head. It couldn't be true. I thought we had everything in order, everything was supposed to be smooth. But now this. It felt like a punch to the gut, one I couldn't recover from. Before I could respond, he continued. I'm sorry, Ms. Hawthorne, but it seems that your in-laws are blocking access to the funds. They've frozen all accounts related to your husband's estate, and they're refusing to acknowledge your baby's rights to any of it. They've made it very clear that they consider the inheritance to belong to the family, not to you or your child. My blood ran cold. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Was this really happening? After everything James and I had been through, after the plans we made together, I was being robbed of everything, and now they were doing this to my child. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but there was no way to fight them, was there? His family, his wealthy, influential family, had always been like this. I'd known they didn't like me from the start, but to do something like this, to destroy everything I had left? This was betrayal on a level I hadn't even imagined. I struggled to keep my voice steady. How can they do this? How can they just take everything from me? I don't know, the lawyer replied, his tone softer now. But we're working on it. I'm doing everything I can to protect your interests, but they're determined to block your access. They're making it as difficult as possible. I closed my eyes, my mind racing. How had it come to this? James had always been so protective of me, of our future, of our child. I thought we had a solid foundation. But now it felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall. I ended the call, but the numbness didn't leave. My mind kept spinning as I stared at the phone, trying to process what had just happened. How could they do this? How could his own family turn on me like this? The questions swirled around me, but I had no answers. All I could do was feel the weight of the betrayal settle in my chest, crushing me. I felt the tears begin to sting my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Not yet. Not when I needed to be strong, when I needed to protect my baby. But the pain, the pain was unbearable. I never imagined I'd be facing something like this, not in my worst nightmares. My mind kept flashing back to James. His smile, his laughter, the way he always made me feel safe. How could his family turn against us like this? As the shock slowly began to wear off, anger started to creep in. Anger at them, at myself, at the world for letting this happen. But most of all, anger at the way they were treating my unborn child. This wasn't just about money, it was about power. It was about control. They wanted to erase me, erase my child, as if we didn't matter. As if our future didn't matter. But I wasn't going to let them. I couldn't. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I wasn't going to let this happen. I wasn't going to roll over and let them win. They could take the money, they could take the house, but they couldn't take my dignity. They couldn't take my right to stand up for what was mine, what was rightfully my baby's. I would fight them, even if it meant going up against the wealth and power of James's family. I had nothing left to lose. I stood up and walked over to the window looking out at the street below. It was quiet, too quiet, but in the silence I could hear the resolve building inside me. I wasn't alone. I had my baby and that was all I needed. I would fight with everything I had. This wasn't just about money. This was about protecting the legacy of the man I loved, protecting my child from the greed of people who had never cared about us. They had underestimated me and they would regret it. The game was about to change and I was going to make sure I was the one who won. But first I needed to figure out how to get through this. How to fight back. I couldn't do it alone. I reached for my phone again, determined to call the lawyer back, but before I could, I heard a knock at the door. It was soft, almost hesitant, but the sound made my heart race. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door, my pulse quickening. When I opened it, I found James's brother, Nathaniel, standing there. His face was grim, his eyes wary, as though he knew what I was going to say before I even said it. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in, though I wasn't sure what I was going to say. The man who had once been my brother-in-law, the one I'd thought I could trust, was now standing in front of me, the person I least expected to help. Or perhaps the person I feared the most. "Of course," I said, my voice steady though my heart was pounding. As he stepped into the room, I felt the weight of what was happening settle even heavier on my shoulders. This was just the beginning and I wasn't sure where it was going to lead. But I knew one thing, I wasn't backing down. The fight had only just begun. Nathaniel stepped into the living room and for a moment neither of us spoke. The air was thick with the tension of everything that had just been unleashed, the weight of what I was about to confront now falling on my shoulders. His presence felt both comforting and suffocating at the same time. I had never been so uncertain about anyone in my life. "How much did you hear?" I asked, finally breaking the silence. My voice was steady, but I could feel the sharp edge of my anger just beneath the surface. He shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting mine. "Enough to know that things have gotten complicated." His tone was careful, as if he was choosing his words with caution. "I didn't think it would come to this." I clenched my fist. "Complicated? Nathaniel, they've locked me out of everything. They're trying to steal everything that's rightfully mine, rightfully my child's. And you're standing here talking to me like it's some misunderstanding. They don't want me to have any of it. They want to take everything from us and you know it." He took a deep breath and finally met my gaze. His eyes, like James's, held a familiar sorrow, but there was something colder in them now. The warmth I once found in his presence seemed to have disappeared. "Look, I'm not here to defend them. I'm here because I know what they're capable of," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to find out this way." "Then why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you?" He cut me off with a raised hand. "I tried. But they're too powerful, Rachel. They've always had the upper hand. It's hard to fight them. I didn't want you caught in the crossfire." Caught in the crossfire? I felt a burning heat rise in my chest and I could feel my cheeks flush with the intensity of my emotions. I wasn't just some innocent bystander. I was James's wife. I was carrying his child, the child who had every right to the inheritance. Our inheritance. And yet here I was fighting not just for my dignity but for something even more precious. My future, my baby's future. You don't get to say that to me. You don't get to pretend like I don't have a right to be furious. They're trying to erase us. Erase my baby. You've seen what they've done. You've seen the lies they've been spreading about me. How much more of this do you think I can take? My voice shook with every word. Each syllable was a reflection of my disbelief, my hurt, and my mounting rage. Nathaniel flinched, a flicker of guilt passing across his face. "Rachel, I'm not the enemy here. I don't want to see you hurt. I never did." I shook my head, backing away. "Then why didn't you stand up to them sooner? Why didn't you say something when you knew what they were doing?" He didn't answer and I could see the truth hanging between us. The truth that he had been a silent observer, complicit in his own way, not brave enough to challenge his family, not willing to go against them even if it meant losing the respect of the woman who had once been like a sister to him. I took a step back, feeling the need to put distance between us. "I don't need you to apologize. I need you to help me. I need you to fight with me." Nathaniel sighed, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of his own guilt was finally pressing down on him. I don't know if I can do that, he murmured, his voice barely audible. They're already pushing so hard. If you take them on, if you try to fight them, there's going to be a war and you're going to lose more than you think. I swallowed hard, trying to control the surge of emotions threatening to spill over. I've already lost everything, Nathaniel. My husband is dead. I'm alone, and now they're trying to take my baby's future from me. How much more do I have to lose before I stand up for myself? For a moment there was a silence between us, but it wasn't one of comfort. It was a silence filled with unspoken truths, with the awareness that this conversation wasn't over. Nathaniel had always been the quiet one, the one who kept his thoughts to himself, but I could see it now. The conflict, the inner struggle. He knew what his family was capable of, but he had never truly been willing to break free from their control. I can't fight them for you, Rachel, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I can give you the tools. I can help you find the truth. You need to expose them, and I can help you do that. It was the first time he had said anything that felt like real support, and for a brief moment I allowed myself to hope. But just as quickly the realization hit me. Hope didn't guarantee victory. I still had a long, dangerous road ahead. Tools? I asked, trying to keep the skepticism from creeping into my voice. What tools? He paused before speaking again. You'll need evidence. Proof of everything they've done, everything they're hiding. I know how they've manipulated the system. I know how they've twisted everything to their advantage. You'll need to dig deep. I frowned, unsure of what he meant. Are you talking about my husband's finances? Nathaniel nodded slowly. Exactly. You need to find the accounts they've hidden, the investments they've kept secret, the papers they've altered. You need to find the things they've kept from you, things they didn't want you to see. Because when you expose them, Rachel, they'll have no choice but to back off. But you have to be careful. They'll do anything to stop you. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. His words were not a warning, they were a challenge. I had to dig deeper, fight harder, and use everything I had learned about the family to take them down. The stakes were higher than I had realized, and the path ahead was darker than I'd ever imagined. I'll do whatever it takes, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. I won't let them win. They think they can walk all over me, but they have no idea who they're dealing with. Nathaniel's expression softened, and for a brief moment, it was as if the weight of his own guilt had lifted. Good. But be careful, Rachel. They'll stop at nothing to keep their secrets safe. If you're going to do this, you need to be smarter than them. You need to stay one step ahead. I nodded, the determination in my chest growing stronger. I will. I'm not afraid anymore. Nathaniel didn't say anything more, but I could tell he was leaving me to figure out the next steps on my own. I was alone in this fight, but that was how it had to be. I couldn't rely on anyone else. If I wanted to win, I had to take control. As Nathaniel walked out of the door, I stared after him, my heart racing with a mixture of fear and resolve. I knew that the next move was mine to make, and I wasn't going to back down. The fight had only just begun. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the loss, the overwhelming uncertainty, pressed on me with each passing moment. As Nathaniel left, I found myself standing alone in the middle of the living room, the silence swallowing up the space around me. The walls seemed to close in, and for the first time since James's death, I felt utterly, impossibly alone. I moved to the window, staring out at the city below. The world was still turning, the traffic moving steadily along, people coming and going, unaware of the storm that was raging inside me. I should have felt a sense of calm looking out at the city I knew so well, but instead, all I could see were the walls closing in, the in-laws' grasp tightening around my throat. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep up the fight. They were powerful, connected, and their resources were endless. What did I have? A few memories, a burning desire for justice, and the future of my child. If I could protect it. The phone in my hand felt heavier than it should have. I hadn't heard from the lawyer since Nathaniel's visit, and I knew I had to take action soon. But where to start? How could I fight an army of lies with nothing but my instinct and determination? I dialed the lawyer's number, the familiar beep of the ringtone echoing in the quiet room. After what felt like an eternity, he finally picked up. "Miss Hawthorne," he greeted me, his voice a little more weary than I remembered. "How are you holding up?" I didn't know how to answer that. I wasn't okay. How could I be? "I'm still here," I said, my voice tight. "But I need your help. I need you to get me access to the accounts. The family's blocking everything. What do we do now? There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost feel the weight of his hesitation. Rachel, I need to be honest with you, he finally said. It's going to be difficult. They've already made their case. They've been planning this for a long time. I clenched my teeth, frustration building inside me like a pressure cooker. I don't care how long they've been planning it. This is my husband's estate. My child's inheritance. They can't just take it. You're right, the lawyer responded, his tone firming up. But they've frozen the accounts. Without court orders, we can't access any of it. And I'm afraid they've set up everything to prevent you from having any claim to it. I could feel my heart racing. The walls seemed to close in tighter, suffocating me with their cold, calculated cruelty. So what? I just give up. Let them take everything. I felt my pulse quicken with the adrenaline of anger, but beneath it, there was the deep, gnawing fear that this might be it, that there was nothing I could do. Not at all, the lawyer said. I'm working on a petition, but it's going to take time. And they won't make it easy. I closed my eyes, holding the phone tightly as I fought to keep my emotions in check. Time was the one thing I didn't have. I was pregnant. Every day mattered. Every moment I felt the future of my child slipping further out of my reach. I stood up abruptly, the room feeling too small, too suffocating. I can't wait. I can't just sit here and do nothing while they make all the decisions. I need to take action now. The lawyer sighed. I understand. But we have to be careful. Any rash moves could make things worse. If they get wind of what you're planning, they could use it against you. The thought of sitting idly by made me want to scream. I had already lost so much. I couldn't lose my child's future too. What if I dig into the finances myself? What if I find something they've hidden? You'd be putting yourself at risk, the lawyer warned. If they discover that you've accessed anything illegally, it could backfire. The last thing you want is for them to accuse you of fraud. I knew he was right. Every move I made needed to be calculated. But how? How was I supposed to just sit here and wait when everything was being ripped from my hands? The lawyer's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. Rachel, I know this isn't what you want to hear, but right now patience is key. I'll get to work on the petition, but you have to be patient. Patience. The word echoed in my mind as I ended the call. It was a word I hated. It felt like a lifetime of waiting, of doing nothing while they continued to tighten their grip on everything I held dear. I didn't have patience. I had rage. I had an overwhelming need to tear down every wall they built to keep me out, to expose their lies for the world to see. But how? I spent the next few days trying to stay busy, trying to focus on something other than the fear gnawing at my insides. I spent hours going through every piece of paperwork James had ever signed, looking for anything that might give me leverage, some clue that could break the ice. The more I dug, the more I realized how meticulous his family had been. They had covered their tracks well, too well. The deeper I went, the more isolated I felt. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. It was about proving that I wasn't just some pawn in their game. They wanted to erase me, and they were willing to destroy everything to do it. Every day that passed, I felt the walls closing in more. It wasn't just the financial isolation. It was the emotional weight too. I couldn't talk to anyone about what was happening, not even Nathaniel. He had left me with nothing but vague promises and half-formed advice, all the while knowing the depth of the danger I was in. I had no one I could trust, no one to help me through the nights when my mind raced, wondering if I was about to lose everything. My only solace was the baby growing inside me. It wasn't just my husband's legacy I was fighting for. It was my child's. My baby deserved better than this. A future free from manipulation, free from lies. But I was alone. The people I thought would protect me had turned their backs. The thought cut through me like a knife, and I struggled to keep my composure. I had to keep going. I had no other choice. One afternoon, a familiar figure appeared on my doorstep. It was Nathaniel, his face tired, his eyes weary but determined. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been doing some digging of my own. I've been talking to a few people who might be able to help." I felt a glimmer of hope spark inside me. "Who? What did you find?" Nathaniel hesitated before speaking. "I can't say yet. But I think I might have found something. But you need to be careful. If they find out, it could get even worse. I wasn't afraid of worse anymore. I was afraid of doing nothing. Tell me what you found, I demanded, my voice firm, steady. Nathaniel looked at me for a long moment before nodding. We need to move quickly. I'm going to help you. But we have to play this smart. It was the first real piece of hope I had gotten in days. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as isolated as I thought. But I would never stop fighting. Not for me. Not for my baby. The walls may have been closing in, but I was ready to tear them down. Nathaniel's words hung in the air like a lifeline, fragile yet filled with the promise of something more. I think I might have found something, he'd said, and though the words brought a flicker of hope, they also planted a seed of doubt in me. Could I really trust him? Could he be the one to help me tear down the walls my in-laws had so carefully built around my life? I needed to know more. I needed to understand exactly what Nathaniel had uncovered. But as I sat across from him at the kitchen table, the reality of the situation started to sink in. I couldn't rely solely on anyone else. This was my fight now, and I had to be ready to face whatever came next. My baby was counting on me. My future was on the line, and there was no room for hesitation. Where do we start? I asked, my voice steady, despite the growing urgency that pressed in from all sides. Nathaniel took a deep breath, clearly conflicted. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes flickered away from mine, as if he was hesitant to lay out the details of what he had found. I've been talking to a few people who've had dealings with your in-laws. People who know what they're hiding. His gaze dropped to the table, his fingers nervously tapping the edge of the wood. But it's not as simple as you think. The family has been covering their tracks for years, Rachel. They've manipulated the system, hidden money, used loopholes. It's bigger than I thought. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened. My mind raced, processing everything he was saying. How could they do this? How could they just get away with it all this time? My voice trembled with a mixture of disbelief and growing anger. Nathaniel looked up at me, his expression tight. They've been doing it for years. Your husband's family, James's family, they've built their empire on lies and manipulation. It's the way they've always operated. And they don't just control the money, Rachel. They control everything. People, businesses, even the truth. I shook my head, feeling the weight of the words settle on my chest like a lead balloon. It was hard to comprehend, hard to believe. James had always seemed so distant from his family, so independent. He'd never talked about the dark side of their wealth, and I had always assumed the best. But now it was clear that I had been naive. My world had been shattered in a single instant, and the truth was far more sinister than I could have imagined. How do we expose them? I asked, my voice steadying with resolve. How do we make sure they pay for what they've done? Nathaniel exhaled slowly, his hands clasped together in front of him. That's the hard part. They've covered their tracks well. But there's one thing I found, one thing they didn't count on. His eyes met mine with a newfound intensity. I found some of James's old financial records. Hidden documents. Transactions that were never reported. It's not much, but it's a start. I leaned forward, my heart racing. What kind of transactions? What are we talking about? Nathaniel hesitated, glancing around the room as if he feared someone might overhear. He lowered his voice. There's money. A lot of it. It's not just business dealings. There are personal transactions, payments made to offshore accounts, investments in places that James never told you about. I think he was starting to uncover something, Rachel. He was getting close to something big. And then he trailed off, his expression darkening. I could feel the tension between us thickening. What had Nathaniel just said? James had been digging into the family's financial dealings? Why hadn't he told me? Then what? What happened? Nathaniel's gaze shifted, and I saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of what had really happened to James, of what he might have uncovered. I don't know for sure, Rachel. But I think your husband was planning to expose them. I think he knew they were hiding something, and that's why they took him out. I recoiled, the words stabbing at me like shards of glass. You think they killed him? You think they... My voice trailed off, choked by the realization that the man I had loved, the man I had married, might have been silenced because of his search for the truth. Nathaniel's face was pale. I'm not saying that for sure, but it's possible. James was too smart, Rachel. He was onto something, and they couldn't afford for him to keep digging. Not when he was so close. A chill ran down my spine and I felt as though the room itself was closing in on me. James, the man I had trusted, the man I had spent my life with, was he really gone because of this? Was he murdered because he knew too much? I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push the dark thoughts away, but they kept returning, swirling around me like a storm I couldn't escape. No, I couldn't let myself go down that path. I had to keep my focus. My child needed me to stay strong, to stay focused. If I let myself get consumed by the past, by the pain of losing James, I would never make it out of this alive. Where are these records? I asked, forcing my voice to remain calm. Where do we find them? Nathaniel leaned forward, his face hardening with determination. I know where they are. But getting to them won't be easy. Your in-laws have people everywhere, Rachel. They've covered their tracks so well that it's like they've erased James from the system entirely. But I have a contact. Someone who might be able to help us access the files we need. I nodded, my mind already racing through the possibilities. What do we need to do? I'll do anything to get those records. He studied me for a moment as if weighing the risks. We'll need to be careful. If they find out what we're doing, they won't hesitate to shut us down. But if we're careful, if we move quickly, we can get what we need. And once we have it, we can expose them. We can make sure they pay for what they've done. I took a deep breath, the resolve in my chest hardening. Then we'll do it. We'll expose them. I won't let them get away with this. Nathaniel stood up, and for the first time since he had entered my house, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could bring them down. Hope that we could uncover the truth and make them face the consequences of their actions. He nodded, his face set with determination. Let's do it. As he turned to leave, I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about getting back what they had stolen from me. It was about justice. It was about making sure James's legacy wasn't erased, that the truth about his life, and about the family that had betrayed him, would never be forgotten. I wasn't just fighting for my child anymore. I was fighting for everything James had stood for. And I was going to win. The weight of everything, the secrets, the betrayals, the lies, had been building, pressing on me until I felt like I was suffocating under the pressure. I had uncovered some of James's deepest secrets, found evidence of the financial manipulation, and even seen the depths to which his family would go to protect their empire. But there was still one piece of the puzzle left, one question that had been nagging at me since the moment they first blocked me from his accounts. What was the real truth behind my unborn child's claim to his wealth? The lawyer had promised me that the fight wasn't over, that there was still a chance to expose the in-laws for their fraudulent dealings. But I had to be smarter than them. I had to play my cards carefully. And one card, one final move remained in my hand. I had to take the DNA test. The thought of it made my stomach churn. There were still so many unknowns. What if it didn't give me the answers I was hoping for? What if it confirmed the in-laws' lies, that my baby had no legitimate claim to the wealth James had built? The stakes couldn't be higher. But there was no turning back now. I couldn't keep running from the truth, not when everything I had worked for was on the line. The clinic was quiet, almost too quiet. The fluorescent lights above hummed, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air, making me feel dizzy. I had never been a fan of these sterile, impersonal places. But today, I wasn't here for a routine checkup or a simple appointment. Today, everything hinged on this moment. This test. The results would either give me a reason to fight or make me question everything I thought I knew. I sat down in the sterile waiting room, my fingers tapping nervously against the plastic seat. I had been here before years ago when I first found out I was pregnant. That was a much different time. There was excitement then, joy, anticipation. But now all I could think about was the future, the legacy I was about to inherit, and the family that was actively trying to take it all away from me. Miss Hawthorne. A nurse called out and I jumped, startled from my thoughts. I stood up, smoothing down my shirt and followed her down the hallway. The process was quick. A simple blood draw, a few vials of my blood taken from my arm. But it felt like the longest procedure of my life. As the nurse walked away, leaving me alone in the sterile room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence in the room felt too heavy. My mind raced with every possible outcome. What if the test came back and proved I had no claim to James's wealth? What if the in-laws were right? What if I had been fighting this battle for nothing? I could hear my heart pounding in my chest as I sat there, staring at the empty walls. Time seemed to stretch on forever. I couldn't focus on anything except the test, the results that would arrive in a few days. It felt like waiting for a verdict, like waiting for someone to decide my fate. 2 days later the call came. I was sitting at my kitchen table sorting through more documents when the phone rang. I looked at the screen, saw the familiar number of the clinic, and my stomach flipped. "Ms. Hawthorne, we have your results," the voice on the other end said, calm but professional. "We'll send the official documentation by mail. But I wanted to let you know that the DNA test has confirmed that your baby is indeed the biological heir to James Hawthorne's estate." I froze. The words hung in the air, the weight of them crashing down on me. The words I had been desperately hoping for had just come true. My baby was the rightful heir. This was the confirmation I had been waiting for. It was the piece of the puzzle that had eluded me for so long. I could barely speak, my voice trembling as I responded. "Are you sure? There's no mistake." The nurse assured me that the results were final, that there was no doubt. "Your child is entitled to the inheritance." I hung up the phone, still reeling from the news. It felt like everything had shifted, like the earth beneath me had cracked open and the truth had risen to the surface. But with that truth came a new understanding. One that was both liberating and terrifying. The in-laws had been hiding something. They had been trying to erase my child from the family's legacy, but now there was no denying it. My baby was part of that legacy. My baby belonged. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The lights flickered in the distance, and I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. But this was my moment. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The fight wasn't over, but I had the upper hand now. I wasn't going to let them steal everything from me. I wasn't going to let them erase my baby's future. I had the truth. I had the evidence. And now nothing could stop me. But even as I stood there, feeling the weight of the victory settling in, another thought crept into my mind. What would the family do when they found out? What would they do when they realized that their carefully constructed lies had crumbled? I knew they wouldn't give up easily. They'd fight, manipulate, and use every trick in the book to try to take back what they thought was rightfully theirs. But this time I was ready. The day the results arrived in the mail, I didn't waste any time. I contacted the lawyer immediately, my voice shaking as I relayed the news. "It's true," I told him. "The test confirms it. My baby is James's heir. We have what we need." The lawyer was quiet for a moment, then said, "This is huge, Rachel. We have everything we need now. It's time to act." My heart pounded in my chest as I sat back in my chair. The moment of truth had arrived. It was time to expose them, to take them down and make sure they paid for what they had done. The battle wasn't over, but now I had the power to fight back. The in-laws thought they could get away with everything. They thought they could control my life, my child's life, and they had tried to erase us from the family's history. But now the truth was out. My baby had the right to everything James had left behind, and I would make sure that nothing stood in the way of my child's future. I was no longer the victim. I was the victor. And I would not let them win. The phone call from the lawyer felt like the start of something irreversible, something bigger than me. He had always been calm, composed. His voice a stabilizing force when everything else in my life was spinning out of control. But today I could hear a distinct edge in his tone, an urgency that mirrored the beating of my own heart. "Rachel, we have to move quickly. The in-laws won't wait. We can't afford to let them get ahead of us," he said, his voice serious but not without a thread of hope woven through. "This is it. It's time to make our move." I stood in the middle of my living room, feeling the weight of his words press into my chest. It had been a long, grueling fight to get here, but now that the truth was out, there was no turning back. I had everything I needed. The DNA results, the financial records Nathaniel had uncovered, and most importantly, the conviction to see this through to the end. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady but raw. "What do we need to do?" The lawyer outlined the plan. We'd file a motion to contest the family's control over the estate. We had the evidence and we had the truth on our side. But even with everything stacked in our favor, I couldn't shake the fear that the in-laws would find a way to worm out of it, to twist the law and manipulate the system the way they always had. But it didn't matter. I wasn't backing down. The court filings were submitted and then came the waiting. It felt like an eternity, each day stretching out as I held my breath, hoping that the wheels of justice would turn in my favor. The in-laws, of course, had already begun their smear campaign. They had the money, the connections, and the power to influence the public narrative. I knew they would pull every dirty trick in the book to discredit me, to make me out to be the villain in a story they had carefully crafted. But I wasn't going to let them. I had my own truth. I had my own story. The day the court hearing was scheduled felt surreal. It was as if I were watching my life from the outside, disconnected from the emotions that should have been surging through me. It wasn't just about money or revenge anymore. It was about exposing the lies that had controlled James's family, the lies that had tried to erase my child and me. This was bigger than me, and I was ready to make sure the world knew the truth. I arrived at the courthouse early, a knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. The imposing building loomed in front of me, its stone walls cold and unyielding. I couldn't help but feel small in the face of everything, small in the face of this enormous battle that I was about to fight. I walked into the courtroom, my hands trembling as I held the papers that would change everything. The cold, sterile air inside the courtroom seemed to close in around me. There were murmurs from the other side of the room, whispers that I couldn't quite make out but that I knew were directed at me. I felt their eyes on me, the in-laws and their legal team already seated, watching me with smug expressions. I had expected this. I had prepared for this moment. But nothing could have prepared me for the way their cold stares made me feel like an intruder in my own life. The judge walked in and the room fell silent. I stood up, my knees weak but my resolve unshakable. The proceedings began, and for the first time since this all started, I could see the flicker of something in the air. Something real, something that felt like it was within my reach. The in-laws' lawyer was the first to speak, smooth and confident, his words carefully crafted to make me seem like the villain in this story. He painted me as a gold digger, someone who had manipulated her way into James's life for financial gain. The words hit me like a slap in the face, and I could feel the heat of shame rising in my cheeks, even though I knew the accusations were lies. But I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. I wasn't going to let them define me. When it was my turn to speak, I stood tall, my voice steady despite the rising tide of anger inside me. Your Honor, I began, the truth is simple. My child is the rightful heir to James's estate. This family has tried to manipulate and control everything for their own gain, and now they want to take away what is rightfully mine and my child's. I won't let that happen. My voice echoed in the silent courtroom, the words ringing with the weight of everything I had fought for. I spoke not just for myself but for James, for the life we had built together, and for the future I wanted for my child. As I spoke, I saw their faces begin to shift. The smug expressions that had once been so confident began to crack just a little. They didn't expect me to fight back like this. They thought they could break me. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. The lawyer tried to argue against me, spinning more lies, trying to twist the truth. But I was ready for him. I had the evidence. I had the documents. And as I presented the financial records, proof of the in-laws' manipulation, proof of the offshore accounts and hidden transactions, I saw their confidence begin to waver. The truth was coming out and they couldn't stop it. The tension in the room was palpable. I could feel the eyes of the judge on me, the weight of his gaze like a heavy hand on my shoulder. I kept my eyes forward, never wavering even as the pressure mounted. The in-laws were starting to realize they couldn't just sweep this under the rug. Their carefully crafted lies were being torn apart, piece by piece. The judge took his time, poring over the documents, asking questions, making sure everything was in order. The air in the room seemed to freeze as we all waited for his decision. When he finally spoke, it was like the breath I had been holding for so long was released all at once. Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of Ms. Hawthorne, the judge said, his voice firm and resolute. Her child is the rightful heir to the estate. The actions of the defendant's family have been fraudulent, and they are to relinquish control of the assets to Ms. Hawthorne. I felt the floor beneath me shift, my heart leaping in my chest. It was over. We had won. The in-laws had been exposed for the frauds they were, and my child's future was secure. I could hardly believe it. The tears that I had held back for so long began to fall, not out of sadness but out of relief, out of the sheer weight of everything that had been lifted from my shoulders. I had won. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I could finally breathe. The courtroom was packed, far more than I had expected. The murmur of voices, the shuffle of feet, and the subtle scent of cologne and coffee hung in the air, a sharp contrast to the tension I felt settling in my chest. The world had suddenly become a blur of papers, legal jargon, and bright lights. I had won in the judge's chambers, but this was the real battle. This was the moment that would decide everything. It would expose the lies and the manipulation for all to see. It would expose them. I had never imagined that my life would take me here, standing in front of a crowd, my every word scrutinized by strangers, while the in-laws' cold eyes watched me from across the room, calculating, waiting for me to falter. But I was done faltering. I was done being afraid. I was done letting them win. The lawyers on the opposing side were already preparing their statements, flipping through stacks of papers, whispering to each other in hushed voices. They looked as if they had done this 1,000 times before, confident, smooth, ready to manipulate the truth. But this time they didn't know who they were up against. The judge's gavel struck with authority and the room fell silent. I could feel my palms sweating, my heart racing in my chest. This was it. I would either expose them for who they truly were, or they would continue to hide behind their lies, their wealth, their power. I had no choice but to speak the truth. "Ms. Hawthorne," the judge called, his voice steady, "you may proceed with your statement." I stood up, my legs feeling shaky beneath me, but my resolve was unshakable. I had to do this. For me. For my child. For James. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of strength I had, and began to speak. "Your Honor," I said, my voice firm but emotional, "I stand before you today not just to claim what is rightfully mine, but to claim what is rightfully my child's. The legacy of my late husband, James, has been manipulated by his family, his own blood, and they have done everything in their power to erase us. But today the truth will come out." The words hung in the air for a moment, as if the room collectively held its breath. I could feel their eyes on me, cold, skeptical, calculating, but I couldn't stop now. This was my moment, my chance to make sure James's name and his legacy would not be erased by the greed and lies of his family. "They've tried to discredit me," I continued, "paint me as someone I'm not. They've spread lies about my intentions, my marriage, my future. But the truth is simple. My child is the rightful heir to James's estate. We have the evidence to prove it. We have the DNA test that confirms my baby's connection to James, and we have the financial records that show how his family manipulated the system to keep us out. This isn't just a fight for money. It's a fight for what's right." I could see the in-laws shift uncomfortably in their seats. The lawyer for the opposing side, who had once seemed so confident, now looked slightly less sure. I could tell that my words had unsettled them. The power they had held over me for so long was beginning to slip away, piece by piece. But the battle wasn't over yet. Their lawyer stood up, smooth and unshaken, his eyes glinting with practiced arrogance. "Your Honor," he began, his voice oozing with charm, "the plaintiff has made her case based on assumptions and one flawed DNA test. The truth is not as simple as she would have you believe. She claims to be the rightful heir, but there are many variables, many factors at play here. We have documents, statements, and evidence that contradict her claims." I felt a wave of anger rise in me as he spoke. His words were empty, hollow attempts to discredit me, to take the truth and twist it into something unrecognizable. But I couldn't let that happen. I had come too far. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on his. "You can manipulate the facts all you want, but the truth doesn't change. The truth is in the records we've submitted. The truth is in the DNA test that clearly proves my child is the rightful heir. The truth is in the way you and your family have tried to cover up your wrongdoings, your deceit, your greed." The room fell silent again, and I could feel the weight of my words settling in the air. The opposing lawyer faltered for a moment, his confident facade cracking just slightly. The judge, who had been quietly observing, cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Ms. Hawthorne, do you have further evidence to present?" I nodded, feeling the surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was the moment. I had to make sure the truth came out no matter what. "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice steady. "I have the records that prove the in-laws have been hiding assets, diverting funds, and forging documents to keep control of James's estate. I've already submitted the paperwork, but I'd like to present one final piece of evidence. Something I believe will make everything clear." I walked over to the table where the evidence was neatly arranged, and I pulled out a thick folder filled with documents, contracts, and account statements. I handed them to the judge, and his eyes flicked over the papers, scanning them quickly. The courtroom was silent. everyone holding their breath as the judge read through the final piece of evidence I had submitted. It was the smoking gun. The moment everything changed. As the judge finished reading, he looked up, his face unreadable. "This is troubling," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "It appears there are indeed discrepancies in the estate's management, and the documents provided by the defense are highly questionable. I will need time to review these, but this is certainly a turning point in the case." A wave of relief washed over me. The truth was finally coming out. There was no longer any denying it. I had exposed the lies, the manipulation, and the fraud. The in-laws' hold over James's estate was unraveling before their eyes, and they couldn't stop it. But even as the victory began to feel real, I knew there was still more to be done. The battle was far from over. This was just one step in a long journey, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. The judge called for a recess, and I felt my body relax for the first time in what felt like forever. I had done it. I had exposed them. The court had seen through their lies. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt the weight of everything that had happened finally begin to lift. But the fight wasn't over. Not yet. I had won this round, but I knew the war was still raging. And I was ready. The courtroom doors swung open with a finality that echoed through my bones. The judge's decision had been rendered, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight of it settle around me, not as a burden but as a promise. My hand shook slightly as I gathered my things, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from the overwhelming sense of relief, of vindication, that flooded through me. I had done it. I had exposed their lies, their manipulation, and I had secured my child's future. The in-laws sat on the opposite side, their expressions still smug, but I noticed the cracks in their armor. The disbelief in their eyes, the way they avoided looking directly at me. They knew they had lost. And now there was nothing they could do to undo the damage. The tide had shifted, and I was standing on solid ground for the first time in a long while. I walked out of the courthouse, the cool air outside feeling refreshing against my skin, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a deep breath of freedom fill my lungs. It was as if the air itself was lighter, freer, no longer burdened by the weight of secrets, lies, and hidden agendas. My eyes scanned the street in front of me, the world still spinning, still moving forward. And so was I. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, not even having to glance at the screen to know who it was. "Nathaniel. Did you hear?" His voice was breathless, a mix of excitement and disbelief. "We did it, Rachel. It's all over. You did it." I smiled, my fingers trembling as I held the phone to my ear. "Yeah, we did." I could hear the relief in his voice, the way he too was processing what had just happened. "But it's not over yet. We still have to make sure they don't pull something else. They're not done fighting, not yet." "True," he agreed. "But you've turned the tables. No one's going to mess with you anymore. You've earned this." His words felt like a balm to the rawness I had carried with me for so long. I had earned this. I had fought not just for money or power, but for my dignity, for my child's future. I had fought for the truth, and the truth had won. I sat in my car for a long while after the call ended, not ready to go home yet, not ready to face the quiet emptiness that still lingered there. The house I had once shared with James, our home, felt like a distant memory, something I had lost along with him. But today that memory was different. Today I could see it clearly again. I could see the future we had hoped for, the future I was now building, not with James by my side but for him, because of him. The world outside my car window was bustling, full of life and motion. The city moved around me, a whirlwind of people, cars, sounds. But inside me there was stillness, a rare moment of calm. I let myself sit there for a moment, just breathing, letting the calmness settle deep into my soul. When I finally got out of the car, I walked back into the house, feeling like a stranger stepping into a space that had once been familiar but now seemed foreign. The walls felt different, like they held echoes of everything that had happened, but I was no longer burdened by them. The house had been a symbol of the past, of the life that had once been mine. But now it was a symbol of strength, of perseverance, of my ability to reclaim my life, my truth, and my future. It wasn't just the house that had changed, it was me. I ran my hand along the countertop, tracing the lines of the familiar surfaces, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of grief or loss pressing on me. Instead, I felt a quiet, growing sense of anticipation. I had rebuilt everything I thought had been taken from me. And now there was a future ahead of me, a new chapter that was mine to write. The next few weeks felt like a blur. There were phone calls, paperwork, and the slow unraveling of the in-laws' final attempts to maintain control. But every time they tried to fight back, every time they made their next move, I stood firm. There was no more backing down. The law was on my side now, and the evidence was irrefutable. They couldn't manipulate the truth anymore. But amidst the battles, there was also a quiet peace settling in. I spent more time with the people who had supported me through it all. The ones who had stood by me when I had nothing, when it felt like the world was against me. They were my family now, the ones who truly mattered. The ones who had never judged, never doubted me. And with them I found a new sense of belonging, a new sense of hope. Then the day came. The one I had been dreading and anticipating all at once. The day I found out I was having a boy. I hadn't expected the rush of emotions that came with the news. I thought I would be prepared, but when the doctor told me, I was overwhelmed. A son. James's son. The child I had been fighting for, the one I had sworn to protect. It hit me like a wave. Everything I had been through, all the pain, the loss, the fear, it was all worth it. Because this child, this little boy, was mine to protect, to raise, to love. And suddenly, everything that had once felt like a battle, a fight, became a distant memory. All that mattered was the life growing inside me, the future we were going to build together. I would raise him with everything I had, with all the love James had left behind, and with all the strength I had found in myself. I sat down on the couch, a smile spreading across my face as I placed a hand over my belly. Felt like a new beginning. Like the end of one chapter and the start of another. For the first time in so long, I wasn't thinking about the past, about the pain and the battles that had brought me here. I was thinking about the future. About the life I would give my son. About the legacy I would create with him. A legacy built not on lies or manipulation, but on love, strength, and truth. And as I sat there, I knew that no matter what came next, no matter what the future held, I was ready. Because this time I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And that made all the difference. I was hospitalized and my husband couldn't visit, because he was busy with work. Too bad his car was parked outside his coworker's house. The hospital room was quiet, too quiet. My phone buzzed again with a message from my husband. I'm at the office. Big project coming up, don't worry about me. But I was worried. I was worried that something felt off. My husband's absence was more than just physical. It was like an emotional void I couldn't fill. Why wasn't he here? Was he really that busy with work? Or was he lying to me? The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, reminding me that time was slipping away, just like my sense of trust. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, but it couldn't mask the feeling of something far more unsettling: betrayal. I had never felt so alone. The hours had turned into days since I was admitted, and not once had he come to visit. Instead, I received text after text, each one offering some variation of the same excuse. I've got a huge deadline, work is piling up. You know how it is, I'll be with you soon. But something in me, something deep down, kept asking, is that really the truth? Before we get into story, I just want to thank you all for being here. If you're ready to witness the power of taking control and reclaiming your life, hit that subscribe button. It's free and supports this incredible journey we're on together. Let's dive in. I had always been the one to stand by him. I had supported him through countless long hours, his struggles at work, the endless meetings, and the stress that seemed to define his career. He was always the first to tell me how much he appreciated my patience, my understanding. We're a team, he would say, always emphasizing how much he relied on me. And I believed him. Yet here I was, lying in a hospital bed, alone. The messages were polite, brief, and distant. His absence wasn't just physical. It was as if he'd built a wall around himself, one that left me on the outside, peering in. It wasn't like him. Or maybe it was. Maybe this was a side of him I hadn't seen before. I shifted uncomfortably in the bed, my fingers running over the crisp hospital sheets. The room felt suffocating, and not just because of the sterile air. It felt suffocating because I had no answers. Every text, every phone call, every voicemail, all left me with more questions than before. And yet he never made time to walk through that door and give me the answers I desperately needed. Another buzz. Another message. It was him again. I know you're probably upset. I'll be there tomorrow. I promise. Tomorrow. Tomorrow was always the day when things would change, when he would show up, when things would go back to normal. But the truth was, tomorrow never came. I stared at the screen, my thoughts spinning like a whirlwind in my mind. There was a creeping feeling that I couldn't shake. I'd always trusted him. But something was telling me I was being naive, that I was looking at this all wrong. I'd always prided myself on being a good partner. Understanding, supportive, always there when needed. But what if this was a sign? What if all the times I had excused his late nights, the endless phone calls, the out-of-town business trips, had been signs I'd ignored? What if I had been blind to something I should have seen long ago? The idea began to form slowly, almost imperceptibly. What if my husband wasn't where he said he was? What if he was hiding something from me? The possibility felt absurd, but it lingered, haunting me in the stillness of the room. A sudden thought hit me, sharp and unwelcome. What if this wasn't about work at all? What if he wasn't just busy with a project but with something, or someone, else? My stomach churned at the thought, and for the first time, I began to question everything I had ever known about our relationship. A part of me wanted to brush it off. After all, he had always been there for me. We had built a life together. Why would he jeopardize that for something so foolish? But another part of me, the part that had felt the chill of his absence too many times over the past few days, refused to ignore the possibility. The nurse entered the room, her cheerful voice a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside me. I offered a small smile, trying to mask the questions that seemed to linger in the air between us. She checked my vitals, adjusted my IV, and asked if I needed anything. "Do you know when my husband is coming by?" I asked, hoping to get some sort of answer. She smiled kindly but didn't offer much. "I'm sure he's just busy with work. I'm sure he'll be here soon." Her words were meant to reassure me, but they only deepened my doubts. It wasn't just that he hadn't come. It was how he had kept up the illusion of normalcy, of his dedication to work. Something felt off. Felt like he was hiding something. Once she left, I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone. The feeling of betrayal grew stronger with each passing second. I knew I had to do something. I had to know. So I decided to dig deeper. It wasn't like me. I had always trusted my husband completely. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that trust could only go so far. Trust didn't explain the emptiness in my chest, the feeling of being left in the dark. I started by scrolling through the messages he had sent. Each one was carefully worded, almost scripted. Big project. Deadline. Don't worry about me. But they all felt rehearsed. Too rehearsed. There it was again, the message I had received just before. Don't worry about me. I was worried. I was so worried, my heart racing as I clicked through his messages. And then my eyes landed on something, a small detail I hadn't noticed before. A phone number. It wasn't one I recognized. It wasn't a work number. My pulse quickened. I didn't even think twice. I took a screenshot of the number and immediately entered it into my search engine. The results were not what I expected. The name that appeared wasn't anyone I knew, but the connection was undeniable. It was a coworker. One of the few that my husband had mentioned to me over the years. She had a reputation at the office. Young, ambitious, and with a history of being too close to him. My heart sank. Was this who he was with? Was this the reason he couldn't find time for me? My thoughts were interrupted by another buzz. This time it wasn't a message from him. It was from her. My stomach lurched as I read her name on the screen. I had to know. I had to find out. And at that moment I realized that nothing, absolutely nothing, was going to stop me from uncovering the truth. The screen of my phone glowed with the name that had haunted my thoughts for hours. Her name. The coworker my husband had always mentioned in passing, but never with much detail. The one he swore was just a colleague. The very same woman whose number had appeared unexpectedly in his phone just moments ago. I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I searched for her name, but it certainly wasn't this. Her professional profile, which was accessible to anyone, painted a picture of an ambitious, highly driven woman. She worked in the same department as my husband and had a reputation for going the extra mile. At first glance, she appeared to be someone who took her work seriously, and there was nothing remarkable about that. But the nagging feeling in my gut refused to disappear. Why hadn't he told me more about her? The absence of her name in our conversations now felt like an omission, a deliberate attempt to hide something. My breath caught in my throat as I scrolled through her recent posts. It didn't take long for me to discover that she'd posted pictures from recent office events, one of which showed her sitting close to my husband, laughing together, their arms casually brushing. It was a harmless moment, at least on the surface. But in my mind it was a signal, a red flag that screamed, why wasn't I there? The more I stared at the photo, the more it unsettled me. I felt an overwhelming surge of emotions: anger, confusion, and above all, betrayal. How had I not seen this before? Had I been so blind to his behavior, so consumed by my own routine, that I missed the growing closeness between them? As I sat there in the sterile hospital room, the world outside felt a million miles away. My head was spinning, caught between what I thought I knew and the crushing weight of what I was now starting to suspect. The thought kept creeping into my mind: what if he's lying to me? I could feel my pulse quicken, a mixture of panic and determination rising within me. I knew I couldn't sit idly by any longer, letting the silence and unanswered questions fester. I needed the truth, whatever it might be. I needed to know if my instincts were right or if I was simply overreacting. I glanced at the clock on the wall, watching as the minutes ticked by, but no answer came. My mind was consumed with thoughts of him, of her, of the unknown that seemed to be unraveling before me. I reached for my phone again, hesitating for a moment before I typed a text to my husband. I know you said you were busy with work, but I need you to tell me the truth. Are you with her? Is there something going on between you two? I stared at the screen, watching the 3 dots appear, then disappear, then reappear. It felt like a lifetime, each second stretching into eternity. When the message finally came through, my heart sank. Of course not, what are you talking about? Stop being so paranoid. His response was quick, too quick, and defensive. The familiar tone of dismissal was there, the same tone he used whenever I brought up anything that made him uncomfortable. It was as if he couldn't even fathom that I might have legitimate concerns. The words felt rehearsed, as if he had already anticipated this moment, already crafted the perfect defense. But something in me snapped. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, and I needed answers, not excuses. I got up from the bed, careful not to disturb the 4 in my arm, and paced the small room. My thoughts raced. There were too many inconsistencies now, too many things that didn't line up. I tried to remember the last time he'd truly been present with me. Felt like it had been a long time. Months, maybe more. He had always been there, but only in body. The emotional distance had been growing, and I had failed to see it. Why hadn't I seen it? I took a deep breath and began to think back to the last time he had seemed genuinely interested in me. It had been when we first started dating, before work consumed him, before his ambitions turned into late-night projects, missed dinners, and lonely weekends. Back then, he would have dropped everything to be by my side in a heartbeat. Now he couldn't even spare a few minutes to check on me while I was in the hospital. It didn't make sense. Something had changed. Suddenly, I remembered a conversation I'd overheard a few weeks earlier at a gathering with some of his colleagues. They had spoken in hushed tones, but I had caught the name of the coworker again, mixed in with laughter and praise. There was nothing wrong with colleagues being friendly, of course, but something in the way they spoke about her felt different. Was I just imagining it, or was there an edge to their words, an undercurrent of something more? My heart raced as I connected the dots. He had been more secretive lately, more distant. I thought it was just the pressure of work, but now I wasn't so sure. What if this wasn't about work at all? What if there was something, or someone, else occupying his thoughts? I knew I had to get to the bottom of this. But how? As I sat back down on the hospital bed, my thoughts turned to my next move. I couldn't just sit around waiting for him to come and explain himself. If he was truly too busy with work, then why was he responding to my text messages with such speed and defensiveness? Why hadn't he just come to see me like he used to? The question lingered, unanswered. I stared at the phone in my hands, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I wasn't sure what I expected from him anymore. I wasn't sure if the truth would make things better or if it would shatter everything I had believed about our relationship. But one thing was clear: I needed to find out. With a heavy heart, I set my phone down and looked out the window. The sky was turning dark, the sun fading into the horizon. It felt like the end of something, but I wasn't sure what. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I would confront him. I would know the truth, no matter what it cost. The text came through with a sudden ping, pulling me out of my thoughts. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. My husband's words lingered in the air, but they didn't bring the relief I had hoped for. They were hollow, a defensive response to a question he should have answered with honesty. Of course not, what are you talking about? Stop being so paranoid. I had hoped for more. A moment of clarity, an apology, something that would reassure me. Instead, it was just another attempt to shut me down, to make me feel crazy for asking the questions that were gnawing at me. My phone felt heavy in my hands as I put it down, and the silence in the room seemed to fill every corner. My thoughts became loud, echoing off the sterile walls as I replayed every moment that had led me here. I had to face it. I had to confront him. Was I wrong? Was I truly overreacting? No, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was a growing knot in my stomach, a feeling that wouldn't leave. His absence had never felt like this before. It wasn't just about the late nights or the work trips. It was everything. His distance, his lack of concern, the way he had slowly become someone I didn't recognize. It wasn't just about the car outside her house. It was everything that had been slipping through the cracks for months. I knew I couldn't keep waiting for the truth to magically appear. It wasn't coming from him. I needed to take control, to dig deeper, to uncover what I had been avoiding. I needed to trust my instincts, even if they led me down a painful path. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for my phone again. This time I didn't hesitate. I opened the contact list and tapped on the name that had been haunting me for the past few days. Her name. The woman who had suddenly taken up so much space in my thoughts. She didn't even know it, but she had become my biggest fear, my greatest doubt. I couldn't just let this slide anymore. I needed answers. I scrolled through her social media account again, feeling the heaviness of each click. This wasn't a place I wanted to be, but I couldn't stop myself. It was like a compulsion, a desperate need to connect the dots, to make sense of what had been unraveling for so long. Her posts were all curated, carefully composed pictures of office parties, group outings, and smiling faces. Nothing about it seemed out of place, nothing that screamed betrayal or secrecy. But that's the thing about appearances. They don't tell the whole story. I remembered the photo from earlier, the one where she was sitting too close to my husband, laughing in a way that didn't seem right. The small distance between them in the picture felt like a chasm, one that I couldn't cross. I clicked on it again, this time studying it with a sharper eye, looking for any clue that might reveal something hidden beneath the surface. But all I found was a reminder of how alone I felt in that moment, trapped in this whirlwind of confusion. I put the phone down and exhaled sharply. My thoughts were running in circles, but I needed to do something. I couldn't keep tormenting myself with uncertainties. The next step was clear. I had to confront him directly. No more messages. No more guessing. I needed to face him, to demand the truth. But how? How would I even start the conversation? How could I bring it all up without sounding accusatory, without making it worse than it already was? I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I wasn't sure how I had gotten here, but I knew I had to follow this path now. I had to know. I had to make him face the truth. The door creaked open, interrupting my thoughts, and a nurse stepped in, her smile warm and professional. She didn't ask if I needed anything, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She must have noticed the way I was fidgeting, the way I couldn't seem to sit still. "How are we feeling today?" she asked, checking the foredrip, her hands light but purposeful. I forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. "I'm fine, just a little overwhelmed." The nurse nodded, her eyes flicking to the phone I had been holding just moments before. I could tell she wanted to ask more, but she didn't. Nurses were good at reading people, good at knowing when to press and when to give space. This was one of those moments when she chose to back off, sensing that I wasn't ready to share whatever was going on inside my head. "I'll check in with you later," she said, offering one last reassuring smile before leaving the room. I let out a long breath, and the silence settled back around me. I was alone again. The tension in the room felt suffocating. I had no one to turn to, no one to ask for advice. This was something I had to face on my own. And yet, the thought of facing him, of confronting the man I had trusted so completely, made my stomach twist in knots. He had always been my rock, my partner. We had built a life together, one full of promises and dreams. And now it felt like it was all slipping through my fingers like sand that I couldn't hold on to. I reached for my phone again. This time I didn't waste any time with small talk. I dialed his number, my fingers shaking slightly as I waited for him to pick up. He answered on the third ring, his voice sounding distant, distracted. "Hey, I'm in the middle of something. What's up?" I could hear the tension in his voice, the way it didn't sound quite right. He didn't even ask how I was doing. Didn't seem to care that I had been lying in a hospital bed for days, completely alone. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Now." There was a pause on the other end, a long silence that felt like an eternity. Finally he spoke, his voice low. "What's going on?" "I told you I'm busy." I'm done with the excuses, I replied, my words sharp. I know what's been going on. I know about her. Another long silence. This time it felt like the weight of everything had finally come crashing down. His voice cracked when he spoke again, but I didn't want to hear it. Look, No. Don't. I want the truth and I want it now, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. The words felt like they had been building up inside me for so long, and now I couldn't stop them from spilling out. Why weren't you here when I needed you? Why did you lie to me? My voice shook, but I didn't back down. Why didn't you tell me about her? His silence was all the answer I needed. And in that moment everything changed. The line went silent for what seemed like an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I had finally said the words I had been holding back for so long. I know about her. The truth was out there now, hanging in the air like a heavy fog, and I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or terrified. He didn't answer. The silence between us was deafening. I waited for his response, but it never came. Instead, I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line, as though he was struggling to find the right words. Look, His voice finally broke through the silence, but it was shaky, unsure. I don't know what you're talking about. What's this all about? I felt a rush of anger flood through me. How could he still act like this? How could he still try to play innocent, pretending that nothing was wrong? My hands gripped the edges of the hospital bed as I sat up straighter, my voice firm but trembling. Don't lie to me. I know about her. I know everything. Her. The phone. The messages. I've seen it all. Don't you dare try to deny it now. My words were sharp, cutting through the tension between us. Every sentence felt like it was tearing apart the image of the man I thought I knew. I didn't mean for it to happen, okay? It's not what you think, he stammered, his voice rising in panic. It's not like that. My breath caught in my throat and I could feel the tears welling up behind my eyes. This wasn't the response I had been hoping for, and I didn't know if I was ready for what was coming next. I had thought he would admit everything, confess, apologize, but instead he was still trying to control the narrative. Then what is it? I demanded. What is it if not what I think? You've been lying to me for months, haven't you? You've been hiding things. Hiding her. I'm sorry, I didn't want to hurt you. His voice was strained, as if he were trying to find a way to make it all sound better. It just happened, okay? It wasn't planned. It's not like you think. Not like I think? I echoed, my voice rising with each word. Do you honestly expect me to believe that? You're telling me that nothing happened? That there's nothing going on between you two? The words spilled out in a flood of raw emotion. My mind was spinning, my thoughts racing, but there was one thing I knew for sure. I couldn't let him spin this anymore. I couldn't let him twist the truth any further. I swear nothing happened, he insisted, his voice desperate now. It was just a mistake. It meant nothing. A mistake. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How many times had I been told that? How many times had I forgiven him for things that should have been deal breakers? How many times had I overlooked things because I wanted to believe in the man I had married? But now, in this moment, there was no ignoring the truth. The truth was staring me in the face, and it was ugly. It was ugly because it wasn't just about her. It was about everything that had been slipping away for months. The distance, the silence, the lies. It was about the cracks that had slowly spread through our relationship, and now they were impossible to ignore. You're telling me it meant nothing? I repeated, my voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. You've been lying to me, sneaking around, and it meant nothing? You think I'm that stupid? I didn't think it would get this far, he muttered, his voice barely audible now, filled with shame. I didn't think I'd get caught. The words stung like a slap to the face. He didn't think he'd get caught. That was the real issue, wasn't it? He didn't care about how it would affect me, how it would shatter everything we had built. He just didn't think about the consequences. And now that the truth was coming to light, all he could do was scramble for excuses, for justifications, for ways to make it seem like it wasn't as bad as it really was. I can't believe you, I whispered, more to myself than to him. I really can't believe you. I'm sorry, okay? He said, his voice cracking. I'm really sorry. Please don't leave me. I could hear the desperation in his voice now, the panic that had set in. He was afraid of losing me, afraid of losing everything. But it was too late for apologies. It was too late for anything. The damage had been done. The truth was out, and it was far worse than I had ever imagined. You don't get it, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. You don't get how much this hurts. You don't understand how much trust I've given you. How much I've sacrificed for you. And now you've destroyed it all for what? A mistake? A mistake that meant nothing? His silence was deafening. He didn't have an answer, and I knew he wouldn't. Because there was no answer that could undo what had been done. The tears that I had been holding back finally broke free, streaming down my face. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was everything. It was the realization that I had spent years building a life with someone who didn't value me, someone who took me for granted. I had been a fool, and now I was paying the price. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said quietly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. His voice cracked again, this time with desperation. Please don't say that. I love you. I made a mistake. Just give me a chance to fix it. But I was done. I was done listening to his excuses, done with his empty promises. He had made his choices, and now I had to make mine. I need space, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I need time to think. And with that I hung up. The room felt colder now. The silence pressed in on me, suffocating and overwhelming. I stared at the phone in my hand, my body trembling as the weight of everything settled over me. He had asked for forgiveness, begged for another chance, but I wasn't sure I could ever give it to him. The trust had been broken, and once that happened there was no easy way to fix it. For the first time in a long while I felt truly alone. And I knew that this was just the beginning of a long road. A road filled with uncertainty, pain, and hard decisions. But one thing was clear. I couldn't go back to the way things were. I had to find a way forward, even if it meant facing a future without him. The cold click of the phone disconnecting echoed in my ears long after I'd pressed the button. The line went dead, but the chaos inside me was far from over. My mind raced as the silence enveloped me, leaving me with nothing but my thoughts, the raw, uncomfortable truth, and the overwhelming weight of everything I had just heard. I sank back into the hospital bed, my chest tight, my breath shallow. I felt the sting of betrayal, the sharp pain that dug deep into my ribs. But beneath the anger and the confusion, something else was brewing, something I hadn't expected. It was doubt. Was I overreacting? The question lingered in my mind like a cloud I couldn't shake. I had always prided myself on being the level-headed one, the one who kept things in perspective. But now, in the aftermath of this confrontation, I couldn't help but wonder if I had blown things out of proportion. What if I was making a mistake? What if I had misread everything, every moment, every signal? The last thing I wanted was to tear my life apart over something that could be fixed. But there was a part of me, a small but insistent part, that refused to let go of what had been said. His words had stung, yes, but it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that something in our relationship had shifted. That we had been growing apart for a long time, and I had failed to see it. I had been so focused on the man I thought I knew, on the version of him I had built in my mind, that I had ignored the cracks forming beneath the surface. I had turned a blind eye to the small moments, the late nights, the unexplained absences, the cold distance that had slowly crept into his demeanor. All of it had been building slowly and quietly, until it had come crashing down with that one phone call. I clenched my fists, the tension in my body palpable. No, this isn't about me being paranoid, I told myself. This is about him not being who I thought he was. I couldn't ignore the way he had been so dismissive of my feelings. The way he had minimized everything, as though my suspicions were nothing more than an inconvenience to him. Just happened, he had said. Meant nothing. But those words didn't match up with the gravity of what I had seen. The car, the messages, the hidden looks between them. There had been something real between them, something he was hiding. And I wasn't sure if I could ever trust him again. But the doubt still lingered, like a shadow that refused to leave. I wondered if I was making the wrong decision. What if I was letting my emotions cloud my judgment? What if he really did love me despite everything that had happened? What if this was just a mistake? A terrible, hurtful mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. My phone sat beside me on the bed, the screen still glowing with his last message. I glanced at it, then away, then back again. The temptation to call him, to hear his side of the story, to somehow fix this was almost overwhelming. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. Not until I had sorted through the mess in my head. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had to think clearly. I had to make a decision. What do I want? It felt like the world was closing in around me. I was lost in a fog of emotions. Hurt, anger, confusion. I had spent so much of my life focusing on being supportive, on standing by him no matter what, that I had ignored the warning signs, the gut feelings that had told me something wasn't right. I thought about the years we had spent together. The laughs, the shared dreams, the promises we had made to each other. Was it all a lie? Had everything I had believed in been built on a foundation of lies? I opened my eyes and looked out the window. The soft, muted light of the late afternoon filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. Felt so calm, so peaceful out there, a stark contrast to the storm swirling inside me. But then the reality of the situation crashed back down on me. The betrayal. The lies. The broken trust. I need time, I thought, the words settling heavily in my mind. I need time to figure this out. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't rush this decision. I couldn't just pick up the pieces of my broken heart and move on without truly understanding what had happened. I had to figure out if there was even anything left worth saving. Could I forgive him? Could I rebuild the trust that had been shattered? Or was this the end of everything I had known? The question kept echoing in my head, over and over again, louder with each passing minute. Could I forgive him? I felt a surge of emotion, my chest tight with the weight of it. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that this could be fixed, that we could get past this. But I couldn't ignore the voice in my head telling me that it wasn't that simple. Trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. It wasn't something that could be mended with a few words, a couple of promises. It took time, effort, and most of all, honesty. I had always believed in the power of forgiveness. I had always believed in the strength of love. But now I wasn't sure if love alone could fix this. I wasn't sure if love could heal the wounds he had caused, if it could erase the doubt, the hurt, and the sense of betrayal that had taken root in my heart. I glanced at the phone again, my fingers hovering over the screen. There was so much I wanted to say to him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Finally, I let out a long breath, and with it, I let go of some of the tension that had been building up inside me. I need space. I needed time to think, to process, to come to terms with everything that had happened. I couldn't keep going around in circles, trapped in this emotional whirlwind. I had to step back, if only for a little while, and figure out what I truly wanted. And so, I made a decision. For now, I would take the space I needed. I would find the clarity I was searching for. I wasn't sure what the future held or if there was a future for us. But one thing was certain. I couldn't go forward until I understood my own heart. The space between us felt thicker than ever. It wasn't just the quiet in the hospital room. It was the emotional distance. The gap that had opened up between us in the past few days, widening with every unanswered question and unspoken word. I had given him a chance to explain, to redeem himself, but his words hadn't been enough. No, they were never enough. Now it was up to me. The time had come. I couldn't keep letting him take the lead, controlling the narrative, dictating what I should think or feel. I had to take matters into my own hands. It wasn't just about finding out the truth anymore. It was about making him see the consequences of his actions, understanding the depth of the hurt he had caused. I sat on the edge of the bed, my fingers tracing the edge of the blanket, deep in thought. My mind was clear now, clearer than it had been in days. I had already given him a chance to confess, to show any remorse. But there was none. No remorse, no acknowledgement of the hurt he had caused. It was like he couldn't understand the gravity of the situation, or worse, he simply didn't care. Either way, I knew what I had to do. I grabbed my phone again, staring at the screen for a moment. His name glared back at me, a reminder of everything that had gone wrong. I didn't need to call him, not right now. He had already told me his side, his defensive, flimsy side, and it wasn't enough to change anything. But I couldn't let him off the hook without him feeling the full weight of what he had done. I needed to make him understand that his betrayal wasn't just a small thing. It was a fracture, a crack in the foundation of everything we had built together. I leaned back against the pillows, thinking carefully about my next steps. I needed to be smart about this. Revenge wasn't about acting impulsively. It was about precision, timing. I wasn't going to throw away everything we had for a rash decision. No, I would take my time. I would make him feel the consequences, but I would do it on my terms. First, I thought about the coworker. Her. The one whose name had been on his phone, the one whose laughter had haunted my thoughts. I didn't need to confront her. I wasn't looking for a confrontation. I had seen enough already to know what had happened. what he had let happen. What I needed now was leverage. Leverage that would force him to see what his actions had cost him. I began typing, my fingers moving quickly as the plan started to take shape in my mind. I wasn't sure exactly how it would play out, but the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I needed information, I needed access to his world, to his life. The life he had been keeping from me. I needed to take it all apart, piece by piece. The first step was simple, I would start small. I would test him, see how far he would go to cover his tracks, to maintain his lies. I started with his emails. They were the easiest place to start. I knew that his work life was his sanctuary, a place where he could hide and avoid confronting anything too real, too personal. I could feel the anger building inside me as I thought about all the times he had retreated into work, leaving me to deal with the messes he didn't want to face. Now I would do the same. I would use his work against him. I didn't need to break into his accounts. He had already made it easy for me. His passwords were predictable, easy to guess. After all, he had never really taken me seriously enough to hide anything. I accessed his email and there it was, like opening a door to a room I hadn't known existed. The mundane emails, the work tasks, the endless stream of projects. But beneath it I found the thread I was looking for, emails from her. They were simple, professional, but there was a tone that made my stomach churn. A closeness. An intimacy hidden behind the formal words. It was all I needed. I could feel the weight of the evidence in my hands like a stone in my chest. But it wasn't enough to just have the information. I needed him to understand what it meant. I needed him to feel the sting of what he had done. So I saved the emails, screenshots that would serve as a reminder. I sat back, staring at the screen for a moment before I closed it. The next step was even more calculated. I needed to show him that I wasn't going to be the one to hold everything together anymore. I needed to pull back. I needed to let him come to me, and when he did, I would be ready. I thought about the moment when I would confront him again face to face. The moment when he would finally see the truth in my eyes. The truth that I had known all along but had been too afraid to face. The truth that I wasn't the fool anymore. I wasn't the one who had been blind. He had been. I began drafting a text, something simple but cutting. He had been so eager to dismiss my concerns earlier, so quick to minimize my feelings. This time I wouldn't let him off the hook. This time he would have to face what he had done with no way out. I know everything, I typed, then paused, staring at the words for a long moment. Was it too much? Was it too cold? No, it was exactly what he deserved. I know about you and her. And I'm done pretending like everything is okay. Don't come here. I need time to think, to figure this out. Don't try to fix it. There's no fixing this. I read it again, making sure every word hit just the right note. It wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about making him see that I wasn't someone he could lie to anymore, that I wasn't someone who would just accept his excuses. He had betrayed my trust, and now he would feel the weight of that betrayal. I hit send. The message lingered in the air between us, even though he hadn't read it yet. I knew it would sting. I knew it would hurt him. But more than anything, I knew it would make him question everything. I leaned back against the pillows, closing my eyes for a moment. The tension in my body had finally started to ease, the knot in my stomach loosening as I realized something. I had taken control. I had started the process of reclaiming my life, and no matter what happened next, I knew I had made the right decision. But there was still more to come. This was just the beginning. The phone buzzed again, pulling me out of the silence that had settled over the room. It was him. My heart pounded as I glanced at the screen, seeing his name flash in bold letters. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail like the last dozen messages had. But this time felt different. I had already made up my mind, already committed to the path ahead. I unlocked the phone and stared at his message, taking a deep breath before reading it. I know you're upset. I'll explain everything, just please, let's talk. I stared at the words for a moment, letting the anger rise in my chest. But after everything he'd done? The lies, the secrecy, the betrayal? What was there left to talk about? But something in me paused, a small voice whispering that now was not the time for weakness. I had already made the decision to take control, to stop being the one left in the dark. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I started typing, my words sharp and purposeful. You had your chance to explain. There's nothing left to discuss. I hit send, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my chest. The truth was, I was done waiting. Done with his empty promises. I had already decided to move forward with the plan. There was no turning back now. I put the phone down and sat back against the bed, the silence feeling heavier now. Each passing moment felt like a shift in the air, like the world around me was holding its breath, waiting for me to make my next move. The plan was simple but powerful. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I wasn't going to make excuses for him. I was going to show him what it felt like to live in the world he had created. A world built on deceit, a world where I was just a shadow waiting in the wings. It wasn't about revenge. It was about showing him the consequences of his choices. It was about making him realize that there was no easy way out anymore. I thought about everything I had discovered. His emails, the messages, the way he had treated me. He had taken my trust and turned it into something unrecognizable. Now it was my turn. The first step was the easiest. I had to cut ties. Completely. I couldn't keep pretending like things were normal, like we could go back to the way things were before the lies. Every time I thought about it, my chest tightened with a mixture of anger and sadness. But it was necessary. I opened the drawer next to the bed, pulling out the small notebook I kept hidden there. I had written everything down in detail. Every little moment that didn't add up, every text message, every phone call. It wasn't just about getting revenge anymore. It was about holding him accountable for his actions. I had to make him see how deep the betrayal went, how much it had hurt. I began drafting my next move. The truth was, I wasn't sure what would happen once I sent this message. But I couldn't let the fear stop me anymore. The fear of being hurt, the fear of losing him. That fear had already become irrelevant. I was already losing him. He had already lost me. I was done waiting for answers. The only thing left to do was make him face the reality of what he had done. I typed out a new message, taking my time to make sure every word was precise, every sentence impactful. I need space. Time to think. Don't come to the hospital. Don't call. I need to be alone. I paused before hitting send. This was it. This was the turning point. With this message, I was making a statement. No more excuses. No more pretending. I pressed the button and the message was sent. I sat back, letting the stillness wash over me. There was no going back now. Everything was set in motion. The waiting began. I knew he would try to reach out again. He would apologize, beg for forgiveness, promise that things would change. But none of that mattered anymore. I had seen the truth and there was no going back from that. The next part of the plan would take time. I wasn't going to make any hasty decisions. The truth was, I had already made up my mind. I needed to be alone, to think, to process everything that had happened. I needed to see things clearly before making any more decisions. But as I sat there, the weight of everything slowly settled around me. I realized that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about him. I wasn't worried about what he would do or how he would react. For the first time, I was thinking about me. I wasn't going to let him continue to control my emotions, my decisions, my life. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. I was in control now. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment as I steadied myself. This wasn't just about him. It was about me, about reclaiming my own power, about rediscovering who I was without him. I knew this was going to be a long road. I knew that the emotional aftermath would be harder than anything I had experienced so far. But it didn't matter. I wasn't going to let his mistakes define me. The decision was final. I wasn't going to wait for him to come crawling back. I wasn't going to wait for him to tell me everything would be okay. The truth was, it wasn't going to be okay, not for a long time. But that was okay. I didn't need him to make it better. I would find a way to heal on my own, to move forward with or without him. As the evening drew on, I found myself feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't the peace of knowing everything was fixed, but the peace that came with knowing I was taking control. I was no longer trapped in a cycle of lies and fear. I had taken the first step toward rebuilding my life. And that in itself was enough. I sat in the stillness of the room, the hum of the hospital lights overhead, feeling a strange mix of calm and chaos. The message had been sent. The boundaries were set. I had taken control. But there was a nagging sensation in the pit of my stomach, a quiet voice reminding me that things were never as simple as they seemed. It was as if the world had shifted, tilted on its axis, and no matter how much I tried to steady myself, I couldn't ignore the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't fully see. Something was coming and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. The phone buzzed again, interrupting my thoughts. Another message from him. I stared at it for a moment before I opened it. It was longer than his previous texts. This time there was no defense. No excuses. He seemed almost vulnerable. I don't know what you're expecting from me. I know I've messed up. I never wanted to hurt you. But there's something you need to know. Something I didn't tell you. I felt my pulse quicken. I wasn't sure if it was anger or anticipation that filled me. What could he possibly say now? Another round of empty apologies? Or was this the moment when he finally admitted everything? I typed out a response, my fingers shaking slightly. I don't want excuses. I want the truth. The message was simple, direct. There was no need for anything more. I had already made my decision. I stared at the screen, waiting. The tension was unbearable. What was he going to say? What new twist was coming? I had already uncovered more than enough to understand the situation, but something about this moment made my heart race. Finally, the response came through. It was brief, but the words hit me like a punch to the gut. You're right. It's not just about her. There's more. You won't believe me, but I have to tell you anyway. I never wanted to lose you, but I don't think I can protect you from this anymore. A cold chill swept over me. My breath caught in my throat. What was he talking about? What more could there be? The lie about her had already shattered everything. I had thought there was no coming back from it, but now he was suggesting that there was something even deeper, something darker beneath the surface. I could feel the panic starting to rise in my chest. My hands were trembling as I typed back, my mind racing with the possibilities of what he might say next. Tell me. Now. He didn't respond immediately. Seconds stretched into minutes, each one heavier than the last. I could feel the weight of his silence pressing down on me. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, his message appeared, but it wasn't the kind of answer I had expected. It's about the business, the one I've been working on. The shady dealings, the ones I got involved in when everything started to fall apart at work. I didn't want you to know, but I think it's time you understand. I've been keeping things from you, big things. Things that could ruin us both if anyone finds out. I read his words over and over, trying to make sense of them. The business. Shady dealings. What was he talking about? How had I not noticed any of this? I had trusted him completely, believed in everything he told me. How had he been so good at hiding all of this from me? Shady dealings? I felt a wave of nausea rise in my stomach. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It wasn't just about a momentary lapse in judgment. This was something bigger, something that could threaten everything I had ever known. I quickly typed back, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. What do you mean, shady dealings? Why didn't you tell me? The response came almost immediately, the text filled with an urgency I hadn't expected. I didn't want you to get involved. I didn't want you to know. But it's all been falling apart and I don't know what to do anymore. I've made some dangerous people angry and I don't know how to fix it. I could feel the walls closing in, the panic beginning to rise within me. What had I gotten myself into? What had I married into? The business, the dealings he mentioned. None of it made sense. He had kept this from me all this time and now it was all crashing down. I sat still, my mind racing, trying to process what he had just told me. There was more to this story than I had ever realized. The affair wasn't the only betrayal. It was only the surface. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had to think clearly. I couldn't let the emotions take over. I couldn't let this unravel everything I had been working towards. He had already crossed a line. And now it seemed like he was dragging me into something far darker than I had ever imagined. I decided to respond, but this time my words were careful, calculated. You've dragged me into this. I don't know if I can help you, but you need to explain everything. No. I need to know what you've done and what this really means for us. I pressed send, feeling a slight sense of satisfaction. I wasn't going to let him dictate the pace anymore. He had put me in this situation and now I was going to take control. I stared at the phone, waiting. But the next message didn't come immediately. Minutes passed, each one dragging by. Was he going to come clean? Or would he try to shift the blame again? Finally, another message appeared on the screen, but this time it wasn't from him. It was from someone else. If you know what's good for you, you'll stop asking questions. Leave it alone and maybe this all goes away. The message sent a shockwave of fear through me. Who was this? Who had sent this? I stared at the phone in disbelief. I had already been trapped in a web of lies, but this was something else entirely. The feeling of dread deepened. The lies, the affairs, the shady business dealings. It was all part of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. I didn't know who to trust anymore. Was it him? Or had I stepped into a situation far beyond anything I could handle? I set the phone down, my mind racing. The game had changed. And now I wasn't sure if I could keep playing. The weight of everything that had unfolded over the past few days pressed heavily on me. I could still feel the sting of the cryptic message, the nameless threat that now loomed over everything. The reality was starting to sink in. This was no longer just about the betrayal of my husband. This was something far more complicated, far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I glanced at the phone again, heart racing as I watched the screen for another message, another sign of what was to come. But there was nothing. The silence was suffocating, a stark contrast to the overwhelming chaos that had been building ever since I found out the truth. The longer I waited, the more I realized how much my life had shifted. This wasn't just about love or hurt anymore. This was about survival, emotional and perhaps even physical. The walls were closing in and I didn't know who to trust anymore. The weight of the situation was finally too much to ignore, and I knew that I couldn't wait any longer to confront him. I needed to face the truth of it all. The message he had sent me earlier, the one that had hinted at a darker side of his life, had changed everything. He had been keeping secrets from me, not just about his affair but about something far more sinister. Dangerous dealings that involved people I didn't know and threats I couldn't comprehend. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was no longer a simple betrayal. This was a war, one where I was trapped in the middle. He had dragged me into his web and now it was time for him to face the consequences. The decision to confront him was inevitable, but I wasn't sure what would happen when I did. Would he deny everything once again? Would he try to beg for forgiveness, hoping I would give him one last chance to fix things? I couldn't afford to let him control the narrative anymore. I picked up the phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. It was time. Time to make it clear that I wasn't going to be a passive participant in this twisted story any longer. I had to take control, take back my life. I tapped out a message, my fingers moving quickly but with precision. I'm done waiting. You're going to tell me everything. No more secrets. If you want to salvage this, then you have to come clean. I'm not asking anymore. It's time to face what you've done. I hesitated only for a moment before pressing send. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of everything I had been holding back. I wasn't going to let him off the hook anymore. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions. My heart pounded as I watched the message deliver, but I couldn't afford to worry about his reaction. The silence that followed was unbearable, the seconds stretching into minutes as I waited for him to respond. Would he apologize? Would he come clean? Or would he try to manipulate me again? Finally, my phone buzzed with a response. I didn't hesitate this time. I opened it immediately, my eyes scanning the message with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I never wanted it to go this far. I never wanted to hurt you. But the truth is, it's worse than you think. The people I've been involved with. This is bigger than both of us. It's not just about me and her anymore. The words hit me like a slap in the face. He was still playing the victim, still trying to make me feel sorry for him. But this time I wasn't going to fall for it. The game had changed. I was no longer the one left in the dark. I had learned enough to know that this was no ordinary betrayal. It was something far darker, something that couldn't be easily fixed with an apology. Then tell me everything, I typed back, my hands steady. You don't get to play the victim anymore. You dragged me into your mess and now you're going to own up to it. The message was harsh, but it felt necessary. I wasn't going to give him an out this time. No more excuses, no more deflections. I had already given him too many chances to come clean and now there was no turning back. Minutes passed, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. I could feel my heart pounding, the tension building with every passing second. Would he tell me the truth? Would he finally admit to everything? The next message came through and I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the words. You have no idea what you're getting into. They know about you now. They're watching us. This has gone beyond just business. If you keep pushing me, there's no telling what could happen. The words sent a wave of fear through me, but I refused to let it show. I wasn't going to back down now. He had already crossed the line and I wasn't going to let him intimidate me into silence. Then let them come, I typed, my voice unwavering. I'm not afraid of you or anyone else. You've already destroyed everything we had and now it's time for you to face the consequences. I hit send, feeling a sense of finality settle in my chest. This was it. There was no going back from this. Whatever happened next, I knew that I had done everything I could. I had taken control of my own fate and I wasn't going to let him dictate the terms anymore. The silence that followed felt almost oppressive. My mind raced as I waited for his reply, wondering what would happen next. Would he finally tell me everything? Would he come clean about the dangerous people he had been involved with? Or would he try to backtrack, hoping to salvage whatever he could of his life? The next message came through, and when I saw the words, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle in my stomach. I'm sorry. I didn't want it to go this far. But you're right. It's time for the truth. You've been part of this all along, whether you realize it or not. You're already in too deep. And just like that, everything I had feared, everything I had hoped to avoid had come crashing down. The truth was far more complicated than I had ever imagined. There was no way out now. I was already involved. And whatever happened next, I would have to face it head on. The truth had finally come to light, but it was darker, more dangerous, and far more complicated than I ever could have prepared for. And now there was no turning back. The silence that hung in the air after his final message felt almost suffocating. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling slightly, unsure of what to do next. The truth had been laid bare, darker and more complicated than I had imagined. And now, it was my turn to decide how to move forward. What had started as a simple confrontation had spiraled into something I never could have predicted. There was no turning back now, no easy solution to unravel the tangled mess of lies, betrayal and dangerous secrets I had uncovered. I felt as though I were standing at the edge of a precipice, peering into an abyss, unsure of whether stepping forward would lead to a new beginning or plunge me deeper into the darkness. My heart was still pounding in my chest, each beat a reminder of how much had changed in such a short time. I had always believed in the power of love, in the strength of trust between two people, but now I wasn't so sure. Could love survive the weight of betrayal? Could trust be rebuilt after it had been shattered so completely? I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. My mind was a whirlwind, spinning with conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, disbelief. And above all, fear. Fear of what might come next, of the consequences I had yet to fully comprehend. He had said I was in too deep, that I couldn't escape the mess he had created. And maybe he was right. But in that moment, as I sat alone in the quiet of the hospital room, something inside me shifted. No, I wasn't going to let him drag me down with him. I wasn't going to let his mistakes define me, even if I was tangled up in them. I picked up my phone again, staring at the message. I had been waiting for him to admit everything, to come clean and apologize for all the lies. But what had he really said? That he was involved in something darker, more dangerous. That I was already part of it, whether I liked it or not. But what did that mean? What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? How could I just walk away from the person I had loved, the person I had built my life around? I couldn't stay here in this hospital room forever. I couldn't keep mulling over the same questions, hoping for a different answer. I needed to do something. I needed to make a decision. I stood up and walked over to the window, the soft light of dusk spilling through the blinds. I looked out at the city below, my mind still racing. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, had just been turned upside down. And yet, amid all the confusion, one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. The man I had married wasn't the person who had sent me those messages. I took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill my lungs. It was time to move forward. But what did that mean? How could I move forward when everything had changed? I needed answers. I needed clarity. And I needed to do it on my own. I turned back to my phone, dialing his number. I didn't know what I would say when he picked up, but I couldn't leave things like this. I needed closure, whatever that looked like. I couldn't let his secrets consume me any longer. The phone rang and I felt a knot form in my stomach. Was he going to try to talk me down? Was he going to beg for my forgiveness? Or would he keep spinning his story, trying to convince me that everything he had done was somehow excusable? Hello. His voice was cautious, unsure. He had probably been expecting my call, but this time, there was no arrogance in his tone, no deflection. It's over, I said, my voice firm. I can't do this anymore. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear him processing my words, trying to figure out how to respond, how to salvage the situation. But I wasn't giving him that chance. You lied to me. You hid things from me. You put me in danger without even thinking about the consequences. I continued, my words gaining strength. I can't be a part of that. Not anymore. His voice came through, soft and pleading. Please don't do this. You don't understand what's at stake here. I never wanted you to get involved. I didn't want any of this. You should have thought of that before you dragged me into this, I replied, my anger bubbling over. You made your choices and now I have to make mine. You don't get to dictate my life anymore. There was silence for a moment and I knew that this was the moment when everything changed. This was when I finally took control of my own future. I've made up my mind, I said, my voice steady. It's over. I'm walking away. Wait, he said quickly. I can't lose you. Please don't go. No, I cut him off, my voice unwavering. You've already lost me. You lost me the moment you decided to lie to me. The moment you thought you could hide your life from me. I hung up the phone before he could say another word. I stood there for a moment, the weight of the decision sinking in. I had done it. I had let go. It wasn't easy and it wasn't painless, but it was necessary. The future I had envisioned with him was no longer possible. I had to let it go. The hospital room felt quieter now, the hum of the machines in the background a reminder that life, no matter how difficult, kept moving forward. I wasn't sure what the next step would be. I didn't know where I would go from here. But for the first time in days I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone else to make the decision for me. I was in control of my own life again. And that was all that mattered.